I should have lost my mind the moment I found out my girlfriend was sneaking around with someone I used to call my brother. Instead, I laughed, not because it was funny, because the betrayal had just become the least dangerous thing happening to me. Everyone around me assumed grief had finally snapped something in my head. From their perspective, that was probably the only explanation for why a man who had just been humiliated looked more amused than heartbroken. What they didn't know was simple. The Jiang Cheng standing there was no longer the Jiang Cheng they remembered. I had died on Blue Star, and somehow opened my eyes inside the body of a 21-year-old college student, with the exact same name, the exact same face, and a life already sinking faster than a bad investment. 3 years of chasing Su Qingyao, nearly 200,000 Federation credits spent on her, debt, humiliation, and enough kneeling-level devotion to qualify as a full-time customer service department. Then a cold electronic voice sounded inside my head and announced the arrival of the Red Beauty system. Apparently death, reincarnation, and romantic disaster were not enough excitement for one morning. The universe had decided I also needed a user interface. The rules were brutally simple. If I found a girlfriend whose beauty and figure both scored above 90, the system would recognize her as a red beauty and reward me. Higher affection meant richer rewards. 90 points meant genuine romantic attachment. 95 meant something deeper. 100 meant unwavering love. Naturally, the first thing I checked was Su Qingyao. Her beauty scored 92. Her figure scored 95. Her affection toward me was 20. I stared at that number until I genuinely wondered whether the system had installed a typo as a feature. I had spent roughly 200,000 credits on this woman, and emotionally I ranked somewhere between a casual acquaintance and an ATM with legs. If affection were a loyalty program, I had somehow spent premium money and earned gas station points. The system explained that affection below 30 meant stranger-level indifference. 30 to 59 was ordinary friendship. 60 to 89 was intimate friendship. Only 90 and above counted as true lovers. That meant my official girlfriend did not even consider me a normal friend. I wanted to laugh. Then I wanted to find the previous Jiang Cheng and shake him until receipts fell out of his pockets. The strangest part was that I could not simply hate the man whose body I had inherited. His memories were mine now. I remembered waiting outside lecture halls because Su Qingyao had asked for milk tea and then changed flavors after I bought it. I remembered taking part-time work, borrowing from online lenders, and telling myself every gift would prove sincerity if I just tried hard enough. I remembered friends asking why I tolerated her temper. The old Jiang Cheng always gave the same kind of answer. She is worth it. He was not stupid in the cartoon sense. He was lonely. An orphan grows up learning that affection can disappear without warning. When Su Qingyao accepted him as a boyfriend, even half-heartedly, he treated the relationship like shelter during a storm. Losing money felt safer than losing the shelter. That did not excuse his choices. It explained them. And because his memories had fused with mine, the humiliation did not feel like watching another man's embarrassing biography. I could remember the exact pressure in my chest every time her message appeared. I could remember the absurd happiness of being thanked after spending money I did not have. I could remember lying awake, calculating debt while still planning her next birthday gift. Those feelings were dead now, or at least no longer in control, but their fingerprints remained. That was why Su Qingyao angered me more than an ordinary cheating girlfriend would have. I was carrying 3 years of another man's exhausted devotion inside my skull. At the same time, I came from Blue Star with my own instincts. I had never built my identity around pleasing one person. I disliked being ordered around. I hated the idea that love should require humiliation as proof. The two versions of Jiang Cheng collided inside the same body. One remembered kneeling emotionally, the other wanted to stand up immediately. The result was not heroic clarity. It was confusion with excellent vocabulary. Then the Red Beauty system arrived and converted the entire emotional disaster into measurable statistics. In a twisted way, seeing Su's affection at 20 helped. The old Jiang Cheng had spent years wondering whether he simply needed to try harder. The system answered brutally, no. The problem was not insufficient effort. The return on effort had been catastrophic. I almost respected the honesty. Almost. The more important realization was that I had inherited more than his mistakes. I had inherited a second chance. A university enrollment, a young body, a world with technology similar enough to understand but social rules different enough to surprise me. And now, a system capable of changing the scale of my life overnight. If I wasted that second chance repeating the same emotional dependency, then transmigration would be less a miracle and more a very expensive rerun. I decided on one principle before I even understood the rest of the interface. I could love people. I could spend money on them. I could protect them, spoil them, even forgive them. But I would never again confuse self-erasure with devotion. That promise became harder to keep than it sounded. There was, however, an upside. Every affection point produced 1 system point per day. At 90 affection, a red beauty generated a bronze chest. 95 produced silver. 100 produced gold. Chests could contain money, skills, items, or things the system described with the cheerful vagueness of a casino advertisement. Before I could finish studying the rules, the system asked whether I wanted to open my beginner package. I said yes so fast I nearly bit my tongue. The first reward was a Porsche 918. The second was Villa Number 1 in Jinyuan Shuishu, a luxury community less than 500 meters from Haikin University. The third was 100 million Federation credits. I sat there holding the paperwork like a man who had just ordered fries and received a controlling interest in the restaurant. car keys, registration, insurance, property deed. Everything carried my legal identity. Then my smart bracelet vibrated with a banking notice confirming the transfer. 100 million credits had landed in my account. My citizen rating immediately rose to 5 stars. In the Great Xia Federation, that rating followed money, social contribution, and influence. Every citizen wore a smart bracelet tied to identification, banking, transportation, access permissions, and public status. Mine had just gone from ordinary college student to young man. People suddenly opened doors for. I left the dorm carrying the documents and walked to Jinyuan Shuishu in a daze. The gate scanned my bracelet, recognized me as the owner of Villa Number 1, and welcomed me home in a voice sweeter than anyone from my old life had ever used before breakfast. The villa occupied more than 2,000 square meters, garden in front, tennis court on one side, private garage on the other, heated pool behind the house. The main building rose 3 stories above the property like a rich person had challenged common sense to a duel and won. Then I opened the garage. The Porsche 918 sat under the lights, red paint gleaming like liquid fire. For several seconds I just stared. I had seen supercars in videos before, usually driven by people explaining financial freedom while trying to sell a course. Seeing one waiting for me was different. This one did not come with a subscription link. I got inside, adjusted the seat, checked the mirrors, buckled up, and started the engine. The exhaust note rolled through the garage with the low growl of something expensive enough to have opinions about traffic laws. Driving out of Jinyuan Shuishu for the first time, I noticed the world responding differently before I had done anything to deserve it personally. The security guard straightened when the gate displayed my 5-star status. A delivery vehicle yielded immediately. At the first intersection, pedestrians turned toward the Porsche before they ever saw my face. That bothered me and thrilled me at the same time. On Blue Star, people liked pretending status did not matter while quietly checking watches, cars, clothes, schools, neighborhoods, and job titles. The Great Xia Federation had simply removed the pretense and placed stars on everyone's wrist. Efficient, terrifying. A 1-star or 2-star citizen could walk into a room with the best argument and still be ignored if a 6-star person frowned from the corner. Money translated into access. Access translated into influence. Influence shaped what other people believed was possible. I understood immediately why the old Jiang Cheng had felt powerless. He had not only lacked cash, he had lacked social weight. Now the system had given me both in a morning. The danger was obvious. When a person spends years being dismissed and suddenly gains power, the first temptation is to make everyone else feel small in return. I could already feel that temptation around the edges of my anger. I did not want to become Su Qingyao's opposite version of the same problem. Someone who treated people according to what they could provide. Then again, I was driving a Porsche supplied by a girlfriend reward system while planning how to secure another qualifying relationship so I would not die. Moral purity was going to be a challenging hobby. I settled for awareness. Use power. Do not worship it. Enjoy money. Do not let it become the only language I understood. And if somebody tried bullying me because they assumed I was weak, I reserved the right to make the lesson memorable. I am only human. That was when my phone began vibrating. The caller ID said, Qing Yao baby. I nearly developed secondhand embarrassment from my own contact list. I changed the name to backup tire number 1. Much better. She called again. And again. I watched the screen light up while an unfamiliar sense of satisfaction settled over me. For 3 years, the previous Jiang Cheng had been available instantly, whenever she snapped her fingers. Today, for once, the princess could enjoy the revolutionary concept known as waiting. Eventually I answered. Su Qingyao did not greet me. She launched directly into an interrogation, demanding to know why I had taken so long and ordering me to reach a 2-star restaurant within 30 minutes. If I was 1 minute late, she declared, we were finished. I listened until she ran out of oxygen. Then I asked whether she thought I was a dog. The silence on the other end was beautiful. I told her that if she wanted me to roll over on command, she could demonstrate the technique first. She exploded. I told her I was speaking with the attitude of a man who had finally remembered he possessed a spine. She demanded that I kneel and apologize. I suggested, in language not approved for family television, that she go somewhere extremely far away. Then I hung up. For about 10 glorious seconds, I felt reborn. Then the system chimed. Su Qingyao's affection had dropped by 10 points. My foot slammed the brakes so hard the Porsche stopped at the side of the road like it had spotted a tax auditor. A memory from the system tutorial hit me. If a Red Beauty's affection fell below 0, the relationship was automatically terminated. Worse, if my total number of Red Beauties ever reached 0, the system would erase me. Erase. Not fine me, not punish me, not revoke my Porsche privileges. Kill me. I sat gripping the steering wheel, while Dignity and Survival held a brief board meeting inside my skull. Dignity arrived wearing a cape. Survival brought spreadsheets. Survival won unanimously. I had only Su Qingyao. If she broke up with me before I found another qualified girlfriend, my magnificent new life would last roughly the same length as a free trial. I could either swallow my pride and temporarily stabilize the relationship, or somehow find another woman with both beauty and figure scores above 90 and convince her to become my girlfriend immediately. That second option sounded like speedrunning romance on nightmare difficulty. So I messaged Su Qingyao and told her I refused to break up. Her reply came instantly. Now you know you're afraid. I nearly crushed the phone. She repeated her order to reach the restaurant within 30 minutes. I asked for the address. Her affection increased by 1 point. 1 point. Losing 10 was apparently wholesale, earning 1 required retail labor. I drove toward Jingzhou restaurant while muttering insults at the previous Jiang Cheng's taste in women. Yet under the annoyance, another thought took shape. I did not have to stay trapped forever. I only needed another qualified red beauty. Once I had a safety net, Su Qingyao's emotional stock price could crash through the floor for all I cared. 20 minutes later, I parked the Porsche outside the restaurant. I considered leaving the ownership documents in the car, then deliberately carried them inside. If I was being dragged to a humiliating lunch, I might as well bring a few visual aids. A young waitress approached immediately when she saw the car. The system displayed her information without me asking. Beauty 80, figure 85, 7 previous boyfriends, affection 50. I blinked. The quiet, shy-looking woman had a dating history long enough to need pagination. The system, I decided, was going to destroy my faith in first impressions. She guided me upstairs to a private dining room. Inside sat Su Qingyao and her best friend Ling Shuang, both recognized campus beauties from Haiqin University. The table looked like someone had robbed a luxury buffet. Lobster, steak, king crab, caviar, foie gras, wine, and enough imported ingredients to make my old bank account file for emotional damages. Su Qingyao was beautiful in the dangerous way. A fox in mythology was beautiful. Long, wavy hair, peach blossom eyes, and a tiny beauty mark near one eye made every expression look more seductive than it had any right to be. Ling Shuang was different. Tall, cool, elegant, and almost aggressively composed. Where Su Qingyao looked like temptation wearing perfume, Ling Shuang looked like winter had learned how to walk in heels. I sat down. Su Qingyao immediately asked who had given me permission. I ignored her, asked the waitress for another set of utensils, pulled the lobster plate toward myself, and started eating. The previous Jiang Cheng might have paid for meals and watched her enjoy them. I had inherited his debts, not his hobbies. She snapped my name and demanded I stop. I placed my document folder on the table with a sharp slap, then activated my smart bracelet. 5 golden stars appeared beside my identity. Silence fell so completely I could hear the faint clink of Ling Shuang's wine glass touching the table. Then, the system notifications arrived. Su Qingyao's affection rose by 50 points. Ling Shuang's affection rose by 30. The system identified Ling Shuang as a valid red beauty candidate. Beauty 93, figure 94, no previous boyfriends, affection 80. I almost inhaled lobster incorrectly. 80? Her affection had only increased 30 from seeing my new status. That meant she had already held 50 points toward me before today. My actual girlfriend had started at 20. Her best friend had started at 50. Somewhere, a sitcom writer was taking notes. Su Qingyao noticed the folder, pulled it open, and discovered the Porsche registration and villa deed. Her expression shifted from anger to confusion to astonishment so quickly, it deserved its own loading bar. She demanded to know where everything came from. I told her I had inherited property from a distant relative who had done business overseas and died without children. It was the first explanation that came to mind, and confidence did most of the work. Her eyes immediately brightened. She called me husband. I asked why she had suddenly remembered I existed. She leaned against my arm and started acting sweet enough to give a dentist concern. Moments earlier, I had been an insubordinate servant. Now, I was apparently the love of her life with premium benefits. Then she grabbed the Porsche key. I reached for it. She stuffed it inside her clothing and threatened to scream harassment if I tried to take it back. I stared at her. This woman did not understand how dramatically management had changed. I caught both her wrists with one hand, lifted them out of the way, and retrieved my key without hesitation. Her face turned scarlet. Ling Shuang stared. I expected outrage. Instead, Su Qingyao whispered that I seemed especially manly today. Her affection rose again. I nearly choked on the wine. Apparently, the previous Jiang Cheng's greatest strategic mistake had been excessive obedience. For 3 years, he had treated her like royalty and earned 20 affection. I had argued with her, refused her orders, recovered my own property, and her affection was climbing like a meme stock. I looked at Ling Shuang. She was single. She qualified for the system. Her affection was already 80. My survival problems suddenly looked solvable. I asked whether she had ever dated anyone in college. She glanced at Su Qingyao, then quietly confirmed she had not. I nodded toward my girlfriend. Since Qingyao had threatened to dump me, I said, would Ling Shuang like the job instead? Both women froze. Before either could recover, I tossed the Porsche key onto the table in front of Ling Shuang. If she agreed to become my girlfriend, I told her, the Porsche 918 was hers. The room became so quiet, the lobster might have been reconsidering its life choices. Su Qingyao's eyes filled with disbelief, anger, and something dangerously close to panic. She accused me of being irresponsible and demanded to know how I could pursue her best friend in front of her. I set down my glass and asked a simple question. Did she remember that she was my girlfriend? She went still. I reminded her about the late-night conversation with Zhou Lei, the guy who had once pretended to be my brother. I knew he had offered her a Mercedes S-Class if she dumped me and became his girlfriend. Her face changed. I had seen enough of their messages to believe she had accepted the idea. From my perspective, the case looked open and shut. 3 years of loyalty traded for a luxury sedan. That was not romance. That was a dealership promotion. I told her exactly that. 3 years, 200,000 credits, endless favors, and the moment another man waved a Mercedes, she seemed ready to trade me in. I had never been anyone's perfect boyfriend, but I refused to be a loyalty coupon with a pulse. Su Qingyao tried to explain. I did not want to hear it. For once, she lowered her voice and actually begged me to look at her phone. That caught my attention. I took it and scrolled to the conversation with Zhou Lei. The messages I had previously seen ended right after he promised to get the Mercedes. What came afterward changed the entire picture. Su Qingyao had called him a bastard for betraying his friend. She told him she had thought his offer was a joke. When he insisted she had promised to break up with me, she mocked his appearance, insulted his character, and told him that even if he were an 8-star citizen, she would not choose him. I read the exchange twice, then a third time. This did not fit the story I had already written in my head. The woman was undeniably materialistic. She loved status, luxury, gifts, and being admired. But apparently there were lines even she would not cross. I looked up and, because tact had never been my strongest imported skill, asked whether she truly felt nothing after being offered a Mercedes. She stared at me as though I had just admitted to eating batteries. Then she demanded whether I genuinely believed she was nothing but a gold digger. I considered the question carefully. Then I said yes. Ling Shuang almost looked away to hide a reaction. Su Qingyao's face cycled through red, white, and purple. I had falsely accused her of planning to cheat, and when she presented evidence of loyalty, I responded by confirming a different insult. My emotional intelligence was putting up historic numbers. She started crying and hit me with small, furious punches. I finally felt guilty. She had behaved terribly in plenty of ways, but on this specific charge, I had been wrong. I prepared to apologize. Then she sniffled, looked up with watery eyes, and told me she would forgive me if I gave her the Porsche. I closed my eyes. There she was. Nature was healing. I reminded her that she had been the one threatening to break up. Her expression turned sheepish. She admitted she had gone too far and withdrew the threat. That mattered more than the performance. My system no longer had a knife pressed directly against my neck. I forgave her on one condition. No more princess tantrums whenever I failed to obey instantly. She nodded, with the tragic expression of someone signing an international peace treaty under unfair terms, while her eyes remained glued to the property documents. Then she asked where the Porsche was parked. I told her outside and handed over the key. The gratitude kiss she planted on my cheek arrived so quickly, I barely processed it. Then she grabbed Ling Shuang and dragged her out to see the car. I remained in the private room with the food. Honestly, that arrangement suited me fine. Outside, the Porsche attracted exactly the attention expensive engineering was designed to attract. Su Qingyao posed beside it while Ling Shuang took photos. A man in a BMW pulled alongside, assumed they were broke women posing with someone else's car, and offered to give them his BMW if they came with him. Su Qingyao pressed the key. The Porsche unlocked. His face reportedly changed faster than a bad stock chart. She told him, a man without money should reconsider using a BMW as romantic bait, then drove away while he sat there, contemplating the cruel mathematics of automotive hierarchy. The two women took the car around the city, enjoyed the attention, and eventually drove it back onto the Haikin University campus. Students immediately recognized both campus beauties and began guessing which mysterious tycoon had suddenly entered their lives. Su Qingyao did not correct the rumors quietly. She turned them into a parade. Back at her dorm, she announced to her roommates that she would soon move out and live in a villa. Then she produced my property deed and introduced me, without consultation, as her fiancé. I learned all of that later. At the time, I was still sitting at Jingzhou restaurant wondering why my girlfriend had taken my 14 million credit supercar and left me with a lunch bill. I called her. She answered in a voice sweet enough to cause structural damage. She told me she was already back at school. I asked how I was supposed to get home. Her solution was simple: take a taxi. I looked at the ceiling. Apparently wealth had improved my life but not my transportation logistics. She sensed my irritation and promised to prepare a surprise that night. I warned her that the Porsche incident would happen exactly once and told her not to call me husband when we were not married. Then I hung up. I was not interested in becoming the old Jiang Cheng with more expensive toys. The system had handed me money, status, and impossible opportunities. I wanted to build something with them, not spend my second life orbiting one difficult woman. My ambition went deeper than showing off. The memories in this body carried years of being poor, orphaned, underestimated, and pushed around. I knew what it meant to stand at the bottom and watch the world reserve its politeness for richer people. This time, I wanted to climb, not because I needed everyone to kneel, but because I was tired of circumstances deciding where I was allowed to stand. Then my phone buzzed. Ling Shuang had messaged me. Her first sentence asked whether I was a man. I nearly coughed up a lung. I replied that I was fairly certain, but if she required an inspection appointment, we could discuss scheduling. She ignored the joke and reminded me that a man should honor his word. I had promised the Porsche if she became my girlfriend. I asked what she meant. She answered simply. She agreed. The system exploded with notifications. I had acquired a second Red Beauty. A Red Beauty gift package became available. My brain went blank for several seconds. This relationship system had apparently decided courtship should operate like same-day shipping. I opened the gift package. A Ferrari, La Ferrari. Another 100 million Federation credits, 1,000 system points. A new set of ownership documents appeared in my hands, and a second bank transfer landed moments later. I stared at the numbers and laughed. I had offered away a Porsche worth around 14 million. The system had immediately replaced it with a Ferrari worth more than 20 million and added 100 million cash. Romance, it turned out, had become my most profitable business model. Ling Shuang messaged again because I had gone silent. I told her not to call me Jiang Cheng anymore. She asked what she should call me. I told her, husband. The reply took a little longer. Then she actually sent it. That one word gave me far more relief than I expected. I now had 2 recognized Red Beauties. Even if Su Qingyao's mood eventually fell through the basement, the system could no longer erase me immediately. For the first time since transmigrating, I felt genuinely safe. Then Ling Shuang informed me that Su Qingyao was packing her luggage and planning to move into my villa that night. She wanted to move in too. I sat in the taxi and stared at the message. At no point had I invited either of them. My luxury villa, it seemed, had already developed its own immigration policy. Their move-in happened with the efficiency of a hostile takeover. Su Qingyao arrived with several suitcases, shopping bags, cosmetic cases, and the confidence of someone who had already mentally assigned herself closet space. Ling Shuang brought less luggage and somehow looked apologetic for existing near the doorway. I stood between them and realized I had created 2 completely different problems. Su assumed the villa was now ours. Ling kept asking where she was allowed to put things. I told both of them the same rule. Ask before claiming a room. Su pointed upstairs. I want the master bedroom. Request denied. Why? Because it's my bedroom. I'm your girlfriend. Congratulations. Still my bedroom. Ling turned away so Su would not see her smile. Eventually, I assigned rooms nearby and made one boundary clear. Nobody was entitled to my property simply because they were dating me. I would share generously. I would give gifts. I would support them. But ownership and access still required consent. Su looked personally offended by the concept. Ling nodded immediately. That contrast became the foundation of their roles in the household. Su created energy. Ling created balance. Within hours, Su had explored every room, tested the pool temperature, opened cabinets she did not need, and asked whether the tennis court could be converted into something more fun. Ling quietly organized the kitchen because she noticed nobody had stocked it properly. I had 100 million credits, 2 supercars, and no eggs. Wealth had failed breakfast. We ordered groceries. Su added imported fruit, luxury snacks, several wines, and enough beauty products to suggest a cosmetic emergency was expected. Ling added rice, vegetables, meat, medicine, bottled water, and practical household supplies. I looked at the 2 carts and understood their personalities in one screenshot. That first dinner at home was surprisingly ordinary. Takeout containers. 3 people around a large dining table designed for 12. Su complaining that the restaurant forgot a sauce. Ling asking whether I had class tomorrow. Me wondering when my life had turned from supernatural financial fantasy into domestic logistics. Then Su casually asked how much money I now had. There it was. I refused to give an exact number. She tried 3 different methods to extract it: teasing, compliments, and pretending she needed the figure for future planning. Ling finally told her to stop interrogating me like a bank officer. Su replied that a girlfriend had the right to understand her boyfriend's financial health. I told her my financial health was excellent and emotionally private. She pouted. Later, Ling approached me alone and thanked me again for keeping the Porsche promise even though Su had effectively claimed the car for herself. I told her I would transfer formal ownership if she wanted. She surprised me by refusing. I only accepted because I wanted to know whether you meant what you said. That sentence changed how I saw her. The system had made her look like a materialistic opportunity at first. Beautiful woman, high affection, easy safety net, but she cared about reliability more than the car itself. I asked why her affection toward me had been 50 even before the restaurant reveal. She hesitated. Then she admitted she had watched the original Jiang Cheng from the side for years. She thought he was foolish in love but sincere, hardworking, and kinder than Su usually appreciated. Because she was Su's closest friend, she never interfered. That explained the mysterious starting score. It also made me feel an unexpected pang for the man whose body I had inherited. He had not been invisible. Someone had seen his good qualities even when the person he loved took them for granted. And now? I asked. Ling looked at me directly. Now you're different. Better or worse? More dangerous? I laughed. She did not, but also more alive. That answer stayed with me. Transmigration had given me another man's face and memories, but the people around me would eventually notice the personality change. I could not hide behind vague explanations forever. For now, wealth and confidence explained enough. Eventually, I would need deeper trust. The Ferrari was indeed waiting in my garage when I returned. I barely had time to admire it before the 2 self-appointed residents announced they were coming over with luggage. At that point, I gave up, pretending I controlled the household schedule. I opened my status panel instead. My fitness was 80, charm 90, driving level 2, painting level 5, guitar and singing both level 8. The system had also deposited 1,000 points from Ling Shuang's Red Beauty package. A small red plus sign appeared beside fitness and charm. I pressed fitness once. 10 points vanished. Fitness became 81. I tested charm. Same price. 300 points later, both attributes reached 100, and the red plus signs disappeared. I had expected numbers on a screen. Instead, heat flooded through my body, warm at first, then strong enough to make every muscle feel newly forged. The sensation passed quickly. Then I smelled myself. Whatever poetic language people use for supernatural body refinement, mine smelled like a gym bag had been left inside a swamp during summer. I sprinted for the shower before the villa's ventilation system filed a complaint. When I finally looked in the mirror, I almost failed to recognize the man staring back. The face was still mine, but every feature looked sharper. My posture had changed. My eyes seemed brighter. Even the relaxed way I held myself carried a quiet confidence that had not existed an hour earlier. I had also grown a little taller, reaching roughly 182 centimeters. My body had become lean and muscular, not bodybuilder huge, but balanced enough to look as though a personal trainer and a sculptor had negotiated a ceasefire. I tested the new fitness score in the living room. A vertical jump cleared more than 2 meters. A short sprint felt absurdly fast. I lifted the marble dining table without much effort and knocked out hundreds of push-ups before my breathing even became serious. That was when I truly understood what system points meant. Money was useful. Cars were fun. A villa made an excellent background for bad decisions. But if points could transform my body this dramatically, then every red beauty represented something far more valuable than wealth. She represented growth. My remaining skills carried memories from both lives. The original Jiang Cheng had loved painting. He had grown up poor, raised by a grandmother who spent nearly everything she had so he could study art. He eventually earned admission to Haichin University's fine arts program. Then he died, changing a light bulb in his dorm. Electricity had a savage sense of humor. My own pass from Blue Star was different. I had been an orphan and spent years drifting from place to place until a wandering musician took me in. He taught me guitar and singing. After he died, I kept traveling and performing until a bar owner finally gave me stable work. So the guitar and singing skills belonged to me. The painting belonged to the body I inherited. For the first time, those two lives no longer felt like competing memories. They felt like tools waiting to be used. The doorbell rang before I decided which skill to upgrade. I opened the door wearing only a towel because my clean clothes were still somewhere upstairs. Su Qingyao had prepared a dramatic surprise entrance. Instead, she and Ling Shuang stopped mid-step and stared at my newly upgraded body. I heard someone swallow. Then both women reached out and touched my abdominal muscles at the same time. I backed away and accused them of harassment. Su Qingyao laughed so hard she almost dropped her suitcase. That evening, I paid off every online loan the previous Jiang Cheng had accumulated. The relief was strangely emotional. Those debts had been proof of how deeply he had trapped himself trying to keep another person happy. I did not hate him for it. I simply had no intention of repeating it. Paying the old debts did something the system's millions could not. It forced me to sit with the fact that I was living inside another man's unfinished life. The previous Jiang Cheng had not been a cartoon fool. His memories proved that. He had grown up without the kind of security wealthy classmates took for granted. His grandmother had stretched limited money to keep him in school. He learned early that asking for things created burden, so he became the kind of kid who quietly endured instead. Then he discovered art. For him, drawing was not simply a major chosen on an application. It was the first place where being poor did not decide whether he was allowed to be good. Paper could be cheap, pencil could be cheap, attention was free. He practiced until Haichin University accepted him. That should have been the beginning of freedom. Instead, he met Su Qingyao and transferred the same survival instinct into romance. He believed love meant proving usefulness. If she needed something, he provided it. If she was unhappy, he assumed he had failed. If money ran out, he borrowed. If friends mocked him, he endured. He never asked whether she was meeting him halfway because some part of him believed being chosen at all was a privilege. I had judged him harshly at first. Calling him a simp was easy. Living through his memories made the insult less funny. People do not usually wake up one morning and decide to erase their own boundaries. They trade them away slowly, one reasonable compromise at a time. My Blue Star life had been different, but not necessarily healthier. I had also grown without stable parents. I learned independence so aggressively that depending on anyone felt dangerous. A wandering musician eventually gave me direction, taught me guitar, and showed me that art could keep a person alive emotionally even when money was scarce. After he died, I moved again. Bars, temporary rooms, small performances, jobs that barely lasted. I learned to leave before people could become necessary. The original Jiang Cheng held too tightly. I had spent my old life not holding at all. Transmigration fused those two failures into one person. Maybe that was why the Red Beauty system felt so perversely appropriate. It threatened to kill me if I had no intimate relationships. The universe had taken a man skilled at emotional escape and placed a supernatural knife behind the command: connect with people or die. At first, I treated that as comedy. Later, I wondered whether it was also a lesson. The system's numbers made attachment measurable, but they did not make it easy. I could see affection. I could not guarantee respect. I could receive a gold chest at 100 points. I could not outsource apology, patience, or grief. That contradiction slowly shaped me. When I paid off the previous Jiang Cheng's online loans, I opened each account before closing it. Small balances, embarrassing interest, borrowing histories tied to gifts, dinners, cosmetics, and moments when Su wanted something he could not afford. The numbers were not large anymore. My new account could erase them with a casual transfer. But once, each debt had represented anxiety. I paid them individually rather than using one automatic settlement. It felt like closing doors in a hallway built by someone else's fear. When the final balance reached zero, I sat alone in the study. No system reward appeared. No affection increased. No citizen stars changed. Still, it was one of the first moments I felt the life had genuinely become mine. I promised both versions of Jiang Cheng something. I would not kneel because I was poor. I would not become cruel because I was rich. I would not confuse giving with buying love. And I would not confuse independence with refusing to need anyone. I have broken pieces of those promises more than once, but having them mattered. Ambition without a personal rulebook becomes hunger with no stomach. There is never enough. That night, before Sue came to ask for the Ferrari, I stood outside beside the pool and looked back at the lit villa. The house was enormous, but almost every window was dark. I imagined the future without realizing how quickly it would arrive. More people, more arguments, more laughter, more danger, more responsibility. At that moment, the quiet felt luxurious. Later, I would miss it occasionally. I would never choose it back. Later, Su Qingyao entered my study carrying freshly washed clothes. She had changed into sleepwear and suddenly acted unusually affectionate. I knew there was a request coming before she even wrapped her arms around my shoulders. She wanted the Ferrari. Not a ride. The Ferrari. I refused. She begged. I refused again. She threatened to ban me from her bed. I told her I would survive the tragedy. Her expression suggested she had just discovered sanctions were ineffective against a country with domestic oil production. She stormed away. On the second floor, Ling Xuan apparently gave her the obvious explanation. For years, Su Qingyao had trained the old Jiang Cheng to obey every demand. Now the man had changed, and her old methods produced nothing except irritation. The cruel truth was simple. People teach others how to treat them. Near midnight, I went downstairs for water and heard someone moving around the dining area. I thought a thief had entered. Instead, I found Ling Xuan searching through cabinets with one hand pressed against her stomach. She looked pale. I asked what was wrong. She admitted she was in serious abdominal pain and thought she might have eaten something bad. Seconds later, she crouched down, sweating and barely able to stand. I did not bother calling an ambulance and waiting. I carried her straight to the garage, placed her in the Ferrari, and headed for the hospital. A black Lamborghini appeared on the road and nearly caused an accident by cutting in front of me and braking sharply. I ignored it. Ling Xuan was getting worse, and I had no interest in participating in some rich teenager's testosterone documentary. The Lamborghini returned. The driver, a yellow-haired kid who looked barely old enough to understand insurance premiums, rolled down his window and challenged me to race. I refused. He called me a coward. I kept driving. He cut me off again. I still tried to avoid him. Then he started circling, honking, insulting me, and deliberately blocking the lane while Ling Xuan was curled in pain beside me. Patience left the vehicle. I poured every remaining point into my driving skill. The system upgraded it from level 2 to level 9. In an instant, years of professional racing knowledge entered my mind. Racing lines, weight transfer, brake balance, steering corrections, vehicle behavior, emergency maneuvers, everything became instinct. I looked at the kid and smiled. He had wanted a race. Fine. I drifted the Ferrari sideways until we were door to door and told him I would demonstrate the difference between flooring and accelerator and actually knowing how to drive. Then I launched forward. The Lamborghini followed. Within seconds, both cars were tearing around the outer ring road. Ling Xuan looked terrified, but I calmly told her to hold on and trust me. The confidence in my own voice surprised even me. Ahead lay a brutal 90-degree bend notorious for crashes. The kid slowed. I accelerated. At 200 kilometers per hour, the bend rushed toward us like a concrete wall with bad intentions. The Lamborghini driver panicked. I could see him braking hard behind us. I kept one hand on the steering wheel, raised the other long enough to show him exactly one finger, then prepared for the turn. I pulled the handbrake, rotated the car, controlled the slide, released at the precise moment, corrected the wheel, and powered through the exit. The Ferrari glided around the corner in a cloud of tire smoke and came out straight. For a heartbeat, even I felt the world slow down. Then the engine roared and we disappeared down the road. The Lamborghini stopped before the bend. According to what I later heard, the kid climbed out and actually dropped to his knees, convinced he had witnessed a professional racing god descend among civilians. I preferred a simpler explanation. Level 9 skills were ridiculous. At the hospital, doctors diagnosed Ling Xuan with acute gastroenteritis. She needed an IV and rest. Nothing life-threatening. I stayed beside her until the treatment finished. At around 3 in the morning, she opened her eyes and softly called me husband. I cannot explain why that word felt different coming from her after the panic of the night. Maybe because I had not bought it. Maybe because she had watched me choose her safety over pride before I ever accepted the race. The system chimed. Ling Xuan's affection reached 90. I received a bronze chest. The system reminded me that 90 meant genuine love. I looked at the sleeping woman beside me and felt something shift. At first I had accepted her mostly as insurance against system death. That remained true. But reducing the whole relationship to numbers suddenly felt dishonest. I opened the bronze chest. Inside were 3 cards. A red card that could force one domestic stock to hit its daily upper price limit. A loan card allowing me to borrow an amount equal to my current net worth for 30 days at 1% daily interest. And a heartbeat card that could instantly raise one eligible person's affection to 80, as long as their current affection was below that. The heartbeat card was dangerous in an entirely different way. The red card, however, made my financial instincts start dancing. With enough capital, a guaranteed limit-up move was almost unfair. The system had given me a legal money printer disguised as securities trading. By the time Ling Xuan finished treatment, she was strong enough to walk normally. We returned to the villa before dawn. Inside the quiet living room, she tugged my sleeve and told me she had prepared a surprise. I understood what she meant from the way she blushed. I will spare history the unnecessary choreography. We crossed the final line between flirting and intimacy that night. It was her first time, and I tried to be careful, because even a shameless man should know the difference between confidence and cruelty. Morning arrived, with Su Qingyao grabbing my ear. The confrontation that morning lasted longer than my brief summary suggests. Su Qingyao was not merely angry that Ling Shuang and I had become intimate. She was terrified. At first, the fear disguised itself as fury. She demanded to know when it happened, whether Ling had seduced me, whether I had planned it at the restaurant, and whether the Porsche had been a payment. Ling Shuang's embarrassment turned cold at that accusation. She sat up and reminded Su that she had accepted me voluntarily. The two best friends stared at each other across the bed. I suddenly realized the system's survival strategy could destroy a friendship if I handled this carelessly. I asked Su to sit down. She refused. I asked again in a tone that ended the shouting. This time she sat. I explained my position without mentioning the system. She had threatened to break up with me repeatedly. She had treated the old relationship as if I would always remain available no matter what she did. Ling Shuang had accepted me while knowing the situation was complicated. I was not going to lie to either woman or pretend the second relationship did not exist. Su's eyes filled with tears. So you don't want me anymore? That question stripped away the performance. For all her arrogance, wealth obsession, and princess habits, she was suddenly just a 21-year-old woman realizing she could actually lose the person she had assumed would never leave. I answered carefully. If I didn't want you, I would be gone. But wanting you doesn't mean I accept anything you do. She looked down. Then I explained the Federation's high-star household law more clearly. At 5 stars and above, qualified citizens could legally maintain plural marriages under registration rules. One partner held principal wife status. Others could hold recognized secondary status. The principal wife carried legal authority in family matters that the others did not. I had not chosen anyone yet. That final sentence changed Su immediately. She looked at Ling. Ling looked back. A new strategic battlefield appeared between them without anyone firing a shot. I hated it. No. Both looked at me. If either of you turns this into a competition where the goal is hurting the other, neither of you wins. Su frowned. Ling nodded slowly. I reminded them they had been best friends before I became complicated enough to require legislation. If the relationship with me destroyed their friendship, then I had made their lives worse, not better. That was not acceptable. Ling was the first to relax. She told Su she had never planned to steal me. Su muttered that sleeping with someone's boyfriend was an interesting way to demonstrate that. Ling replied that Su had literally threatened to break up with me in front of her. Technically devastating. Su had no answer. Then she surprised us both. She apologized to Ling, not elegantly, not without pouting, but sincerely enough. Ling accepted. The tension did not disappear, but it stopped becoming poisonous. Su then turned her anxiety toward me. What do I have to do to become principal wife? I laughed before I could stop myself. Wrong choice. She hit my shoulder. I explained that I was not running a points competition. The principal wife decision would depend on maturity, trust, ability to hold the household together, and who I believed could stand beside me as my life grew more complicated. Su looked offended by the word maturity. Fair. At that stage, she was not winning that category. Ling Shuang did not ask for the position. That actually increased my respect for her. She said she cared more about whether I kept my promises than what title appeared on a bracelet. Su stared at her, then at me, clearly realizing that refusing to compete could itself look more competitive. Human psychology is cruel. I ended the discussion before it became recursive. The rest of the morning became unexpectedly domestic. I ordered breakfast. Ling moved carefully because she was sore and tired. Su brought her water without being asked. They spoke awkwardly at first, then gradually returned to familiar rhythms. Years of friendship do not disappear because one night becomes complicated. Watching them reminded me that the women around me had relationships with one another, independent of me. The system interface did not show those bonds. That was a major blind spot. If I focused only on their affection toward me, I could accidentally destroy the network that made the household livable. From then on, I paid attention to more than my own numbers. Who trusted whom? Who felt insecure? Who needed space? Who could resolve conflict? Those dynamics later made Xiao Ru the obvious principal wife. She entered the household not as the woman with the highest affection score, but as the person capable of seeing the entire structure instead of only her own place inside it. I slept until noon. Both women had gone shopping when I woke up. A note on the dining table promised they would return by 5. I ordered takeout and spent the afternoon learning about the stock market. Hours later, the system announced that I had independently acquired the level 1 stock trading skill. That discovery was almost as valuable as the red card. If simply studying long enough caused the system to recognize a skill, then I did not need decades of practice to master new fields. I only needed to understand the basics, unlock the skill, and spend points later. Education had become downloadable content. The girls returned with clothing for me, and enough shopping bags to make the living room look like a department store had surrendered. When Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang returned from shopping that afternoon, they carried enough bags to create a temporary weather system in the living room. Shoes, dresses, skincare, things I could identify. Things I absolutely could not identify and decided were probably expensive because both women told me not to ask. There were clothes for me too. That surprised me. The previous Jiang Cheng had spent years buying gifts for Su. She had rarely considered his needs unless they affected her plans. Now she held up shirts against my shoulders, rejected 2 colors, and complained that my old wardrobe made 100 million credit man look like he was preparing for a group project. I am still a student with a Porsche. Education is evolving. Ling Shuang chose quieter pieces, dark jackets, clean shirts, clothes that fit without screaming their price across the street. Her taste suited me better. Sue noticed. Why do you like hers more? Because I don't need my sweater to file a financial disclosure statement. She looked offended for exactly 6 seconds before deciding one of Ling's jackets also looked good on me. Progress. That evening became our first real attempt at household rules. Not romantic rules. Practical ones. Who used which car? Who notified whom before taking a vehicle? Whether friends could visit without warning? How expenses would work? Whether either woman needed to ask permission to buy ordinary things? Sue immediately declared that ordinary should include luxury handbags. Ling vetoed the definition. I supported Ling. Sue accused us of forming a coalition government against her. I told her democracy was healthy. She reminded me I owned the house. That ended the political metaphor quickly. I gave both women household access through the smart security system. The gesture affected them differently. Sue became excited about living in a luxury villa and immediately began imagining parties, wardrobes, and which room had the best morning light for photographs. Ling became quiet. She asked twice whether I was sure. About what? Giving me permanent access. I understood what she meant. A car can be taken back. A gift can be explained away. A door code says you belong enough to enter when nobody is waiting to let you in. I'm sure. Her affection rose slightly. Sue saw the notification on my face, guessed something had happened, and demanded equal emotional treatment despite not knowing the system existed. I told her affection was not a customer rewards program. The irony nearly killed me. That night, I also explained one boundary to both of them clearly. My money did not make me their owner. Their relationship with me did not make my time, body, or decisions theirs automatically either. If either wanted something, ask. If angry, say it. If jealous, admit it before turning the house into psychological warfare. Sue asked whether throwing pillows counted as warfare. Depends on velocity. Ling said she could probably kill someone with a pillow if necessary. I believed her. The conversation sounded ridiculous, but it mattered. The system had built incentives around affection. Without rules, all of us could start performing for numbers we did not even share equally. I was the only one who saw the interface. That gave me a responsibility they could not understand yet. I could not let invisible mechanics turn them into competitors without telling them why they felt pressured. So I did the next best thing. I tried to make the house safer than the system was. Before bed, Su Qingyao carried her new bags upstairs and stopped halfway. She looked back at the living room, the keys on the table, Ling standing near the staircase, and me holding a stack of clothes I had not asked for. This is really our home now. Her voice had lost the teasing tone. I nodded. As long as we don't burn it down. Ling glanced at Sue. Statistically, she is the highest risk. Sue chased her upstairs. I stood alone in the living room listening to them argue and laughed. 3 days earlier, the villa had been a system reward. Square footage, market value, proof of wealth. Now, there were shopping bags on the floor and 2 voices echoing from upstairs. Property had become a home almost by accident. The next morning, Monday, I planned to skip school and exploit the red card. Then the class group received a mandatory message from our instructor. Everyone had to attend. No excuses. The instructor's name was Xiaoru. 30 years old, my homeroom teacher. Beautiful enough that most male students suddenly became interested in punctuality whenever she taught. The moment I remembered her, another memory surfaced from my old life. I had always been more attracted to mature, composed women than girls my own age. Maybe it came from the kind bar owner who once gave me stability when I had none. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang were gorgeous. Xiaoru was dangerous in a completely different category. That morning we drove to Haiqin University in both supercars. I took the Ferrari. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang took the Porsche. The campus reacted exactly as expected. Students stared. Phones appeared. Rumors multiplied in real time. I stepped out wearing a fitted suit they had bought for me, hairstyled neatly, charm maxed at 100. For several seconds, I enjoyed the attention. Then I told myself I was above vanity. This statement was obviously false, but it sounded mature. I reached the fine arts building early and stepped into the hallway with a cigarette. A mature female voice immediately told me to put it out because smoking was forbidden inside the building. I turned. Xiaoru stood there in a white blouse, fitted black jacket, pencil skirt, and dark stockings. Elegant face, sharp eyes, a calm adult presence that made Su Qingyao's campus princess aura suddenly feel very young. The system displayed her information. Beauty 95, figure 98, no previous boyfriends, affection 10. Before I could appreciate the data, she recognized me. Her expression changed. She ordered me to extinguish the cigarette, threatened to deduct credits, and assign me a written self-criticism after class. The system chimed. Xiaoru's affection dropped by 10-0. I watched her walk into the classroom and wondered how I had managed to lose every available point before officially starting pursuit. The system asked whether I wanted to mark her as a Red Beauty target. I accepted immediately. Some investments start in the red. That did not mean they stayed there. Inside class, I deliberately sat far from Zhou Lei and the other 2 roommates who followed him around. Whatever friendship the original Jiang Cheng had shared with them had ended the moment Zhou Lei tried to steal his girlfriend. I did not need revenge every minute. I simply stopped calling traders brothers. Xiao Ru announced that our semester's final examination would be a 3-day, 2-night field sketching trip to Qixia Mountain. Each student would submit one sketch and one oil painting. The class celebrated like she had announced an all-expenses-paid vacation. I was more interested in the stock market opening at 9. Unfortunately, I was also trying to write the self-criticism she demanded. The old Jiang Cheng had loved painting. I had once survived by music. Neither of us had developed professional expertise in apologizing to teachers. I eventually wrote something that technically qualified as words arranged on paper, then opened the system menu under the desk. I activated the loan card. The system calculated my current total personal assets and approved a loan of roughly 340 million Federation credits. Daily interest, 1%. 30-day deadline. If I failed to repay it, the system would seize all my property. I stared at the confirmation. Nothing motivates responsible investing like the possibility of losing every car, house, and financial achievement you acquired during the same weekend. Before Xiao Ru noticed the brokerage account, she first noticed my so-called self-criticism. That document deserved the quotation marks. I had been trying to write a sincere apology for smoking inside the building, but sincerity became difficult after the third sentence. My mind wandered toward poetry from Blue Star instead. Without thinking too carefully, I wrote a line from Li Bai. Clouds imagining garments, flowers imagining a face, spring wind brushing the railing while dew made the blossoms rich. In my old world, the verse was famous enough to be recognized instantly. Here, Li Bai did not exist. Xiao Ru picked up the page, expecting the usual student garbage. I have deeply reflected on my mistake and promised never to repeat it, copied with minor variations until the paper surrendered. Then she reached the poem. Her expression changed. Where did this come from? My brain performed emergency calculations. I could hardly explain Tang Dynasty literary history from another universe. So I said, the most dangerous available thing. I wrote it. Xiao Ru looked at me, then the paper, then me again. The silence had texture. You wrote this. Do I look incapable? You look capable of smoking in school hallways. Fair. She read the line again and asked what inspired it. At that moment, I still held the heartbeat card. Her affection was near zero after the cigarette incident. I had hesitated to use the card because artificially raising someone's affection felt uncomfortably close to emotional manipulation. The system described it more like creating an immediate foundation of positive feeling than mind control, but the distinction still bothered me. Then I considered the death condition hanging over my life, the usefulness of having more stable relationships, and the fact that I genuinely liked Xiao Ru. I activated the card. Her affection rose to 80. The change was subtle. She did not suddenly leap into my arms or forget who she was. Instead, the hostility drained from her posture. Familiarity entered her gaze, as if every small reason she could have had to appreciate me had become emotionally louder. That was almost more unsettling. She asked again what inspired the poem. This time I answered honestly enough to be dangerous. You. Her eyes widened. I told her the imagery suited her. Elegant, mature, striking without needing to demand attention. The system chimed again. Affection increased. Not because of a card this time, because of the words. That felt better. Xiao Ru called me ridiculous, but color reached her cheeks. I leaned against the desk and asked whether she had ever considered dating someone younger. She immediately recovered her teacher expression. No. Would you consider starting now? Absolutely not. That's not the same as never. Jiang Cheng. Yes. Teacher? She threatened to add another 1,000 words to the self-criticism. I surrendered temporarily. Then she opened an old portfolio of mine and showed me one of the previous Jiang Cheng's worst paintings. The piece was rushed, anatomically uncertain, and emotionally absent. She asked why someone with real interest in art had submitted something so careless. The memory returned. That day, Su Qingyao had demanded I leave class early to accompany her shopping. The original Jiang Cheng had rushed his painting so he could obey. I stared at the work and felt unexpectedly angry, not at Su alone, but at the version of myself whose entire life had been organized around not disappointing one woman. I had bad priorities, I said. Xiao Ru studied me. And now I'm trying to have too many priorities at once. She laughed. That was when she saw the numbers on my brokerage screen. Her amusement disappeared. The amount of capital I had concentrated into one position looked insane to anyone who did not know a supernatural red card was standing behind the trade. She asked whether the digits were real. I showed her the account verification. She asked whether the money was inherited. Partly, I said. That was the cleanest public explanation. Then she lectured me about risk with the intensity of a teacher trying to stop a student from setting fire to his entire future. I listened seriously. Her advice was correct. Under ordinary rules, my trade was reckless. That was precisely why the bet became so irresistible. I transferred my available cash and borrowed capital into my brokerage account. Then I searched for a suitable stock. Xiao Ru walked past my desk and noticed what I was doing. Her eyebrows rose when she saw how much money I was preparing to place in one position. She asked whether I understood risk. I told her I understood it perfectly. She told me no sane person put almost everything into a single stock. I agreed that under normal circumstances she was correct. These were not normal circumstances. Before I placed the order, I asked whether she wanted to make a bet. If the trade failed, I would accept her financial lectures without arguing and follow one reasonable instruction from her. If I won, she would owe me one reasonable request. Xiao Ru studied the chart, studied the size of my planned position, and accepted because from her perspective I was volunteering for financial cremation. I smiled and bought heavily. The trade itself was even more reckless than Xiao Ru realized at first. My cash and system loan gave me roughly 540 million credits of usable capital. Then I employed 20 times leverage through the brokerage facilities available to high-status accounts. Under normal circumstances, that would have been financial skydiving with a backpack full of bricks. One bad move and the position could erase everything before I had time to regret it. But the red card did not offer probability, it offered certainty. I chose Federation Pharmaceuticals because it had been hammered downward and was already sitting near the daily lower limit. The market believed the stock was finished for the session. I bought into panic. The order size was so large that even the platform asked for confirmation. I confirmed. Then I activated the red card. At first, nothing happened. I almost stopped breathing. Then buy orders began appearing. Small at first, then larger. The price lifted away from the lower limit. Traders noticed. Momentum algorithms noticed. Speculators noticed. A stock everyone had been fleeing suddenly reversed direction. The order book transformed. Negative 10% became negative 8. Then, negative 5, 0, positive territory. The chart looked like someone had grabbed a falling knife and launched it back toward the ceiling. Xiao Ru watched beside me as disbelief slowly replaced her lecture. This is impossible. Markets prefer the phrase statistically unusual. Jiang Cheng. Yes, teacher? The climb continued. 5%. 8. Then the stock struck the upper daily limit at plus 10 and locked there. From bottom limit to top limit in one session. A 20 percentage point reversal. Because of my leveraged exposure, the change produced a profit so large the digits stopped feeling connected to ordinary life. My account value climbed toward 2.7 billion credits. I stared at the screen. The original Jiang Cheng had borrowed small amounts online to buy gifts. I had just made more in hours than generations of ordinary families might ever see. That contrast did not feel purely joyful. It felt obscene. Then the system reminded me about the loan. Reality regained its sense of humor. I repaid the roughly 340 million credits, plus the required short-term cost immediately. After settlement, my liquid balance still sat around 2.35 billion. My citizen star rating updated to 6. The smart bracelet notification arrived with sterile official language that could not possibly capture what had happened. Asset threshold exceeded. Citizen tier upgraded. That was all. No mention that 3 days earlier I had been a broke student with debt. No mention that a supernatural romance system had engineered the opportunity. History, I was learning, often compresses insanity into administrative sentences. Xiao Ru looked at me differently after that, not as a rich student, as a problem she had not classified yet. That made collecting on our wager much more interesting. I finally told Xiao Ru what I wanted. I wanted her to model for one of my paintings. Not publicly, not for money. Just one private session, exactly as our bet allowed. Her expression went through disbelief, outrage, and the resigned exhaustion of a teacher who had just realized she had negotiated with a professional loophole hunter. I reminded her that she had called my earlier figure study sloppy. If she wanted to criticize my technique, then naturally she should help me improve it. That argument was shameless enough to deserve its own law degree. Still, she had made the bet. She warned me not to push my luck, then told me we would discuss the details later. I left her office feeling victorious. 5 minutes later, I received a call from Su Qingyao. Apparently, the universe had decided I had enjoyed peace for long enough. I later learned exactly how that request for the Haiyun dinner had been born. Su Qingyao had driven the Porsche back onto campus and parked near the women's dormitory, like a person trying very hard not to enjoy attention while enjoying every molecule of it. The car made subtlety impossible anyway. Students gathered before she had fully closed the door. A Porsche 918 in a university parking area attracts roughly the same level of discretion as a helicopter landing in a cafeteria. Ling Xuang got out from the passenger side, which only made the scene worse. 2 campus beauties stepping from a 14 million credit supercar gave the rumor mill enough fuel to achieve low orbit. By the time they reached the dormitory, people were already asking whether they had found some mysterious billionaire sponsor. Su hated that interpretation, not because the word billionaire offended her, because the billionaire was supposed to be me. She reportedly produced the property documents with the dramatic timing of a lawyer in a television courtroom. My boyfriend owns it. Then, because moderation remains Su Qingyao's lifelong enemy, she mentioned the villa and my new 5-star status too. Her roommates reacted exactly as expected. Shock, questions, jealousy disguised as jokes. Someone asked when we had become engaged. Su apparently upgraded boyfriend to future husband without consulting the other half of the merger. When I heard that later, I asked whether I had missed my own proposal. She said paperwork was a formality. I told her that was reassuring news for every man in history. The next day in music class, her classmates continued asking about the Porsche. Su began explaining its price and specifications with enough confidence to qualify as an unpaid dealership employee. Someone joked that a woman dating a man who could casually provide a supercar should at least treat the class to dinner. Another student agreed, then another. Within minutes, what began as teasing became a full group demand. Su, high on social victory and apparently allergic to retreat, waved a hand and promised a meal at Haiyun Hotel. Not an ordinary restaurant. Haiyun, 5 stars. A place many students could not enter casually even if they could afford one dish. because citizen status and reservations mattered almost as much as money. Her classmates erupted. That was when Sue realized she had promised first and consulted me second, a dangerous habit. Instead of recognizing the danger, she called me and used the same commanding tone the previous Jiang Cheng had obeyed for 3 years. Book the best private room. Tonight, I remember staring at the phone after she said it. The money did not bother me. I could have bought dinner for the entire department without damaging my balance. The assumption bothered me. Wealth had changed my circumstances faster than it had changed Sue's habits. She still occasionally reached for the old relationship, the one where her desire automatically became my assignment. That was why I refused the tone instead of the dinner. When I hung up, she apparently stood in the hallway staring at her phone, while the classmates inside discussed what they would wear to Haiyun. Pride trapped her from one side. My boundaries trapped her from the other. For several minutes, she experienced a useful educational condition known as consequences. Then my message arrived. I told her I would arrange the room, but only because she had apologized and asked properly. No more issuing orders. No more, assuming my money existed as an extension of her wallet. She replied with enough hearts and affectionate stickers to make the screen look medically unstable. Her affection crossed 90 soon afterward. The number mattered because it generated a bronze chest. The apology mattered because it showed she was capable of learning. Those were not the same reward. I was beginning to care more about the second one. That part did not surprise me. Give Su Qingyao a luxury car in 20 minutes, and somehow the entire campus would learn its horsepower, market price, and probably preferred zodiac sign. What surprised me was her tone. She ordered me to reserve a private room at Haiyun, one of the city's 5-star restaurants, because she had promised her classmates dinner. The old Jiang Cheng would have sprinted into traffic to satisfy her. The new me stared at the phone and asked a simple question. Are you asking me, or are you commanding me? Silence. For once, Princess Sue's royal court had lost Wi-Fi. She tried to defend herself, but I told her I was busy and hung up. A few minutes later, softer messages arrived. She apologized. Then she asked again, this time like a normal human being rather than an emperor collecting taxes. That mattered more to me than the cost of dinner. I agreed to arrange the reservation. The system immediately chimed. Su Qingyao's affection crossed 90. That earned me another bronze chest. I opened it and received 3 strange items. A forced purchase card, a bad luck card, and a skill card. The forced purchase card was financial vandalism disguised as paperwork. It would let me acquire a stake in a local company at only 10% of its normal value. The bad luck card sounded like karma with customer support, and the skill card could grant me a random ability. I used that one first. Ancient Tai Chi flowed into my mind. Not the slow public park version people practice before breakfast. This was a combat discipline balance, redirection, footwork, timing, control of force. My body already had perfect fitness. Now it had instructions. That was a dangerous combination. I had barely finished processing the new knowledge when I walked behind the fine arts building and heard voices from a secluded grove. At first, I assumed 2 students were arguing. Then I saw enough to realize they were very much not arguing. The woman was Xu Lei, another attractive student. The system immediately displayed her information. She technically met the Red Beauty appearance requirements. I declined before the prompt had finished blinking. A system could measure beauty. It could not force me to abandon standards. I turned to leave quietly. Unfortunately, privacy and common sense had apparently both taken the day off. Xu Lei spotted me. The man with her, Zhao Zicheng, was a vice president at an entertainment company and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had spent too long surrounded by employees paid to laugh at his jokes. He accused me of secretly filming them. I showed him my empty hands and told him I had no interest in keeping souvenirs from his midlife crisis. He did not appreciate the review. He demanded my phone. I refused. He tried to take it. That was when my new Tai Chi education stopped being theoretical. Zhao lunged forward. I shifted half a step, redirected his arm, and helped gravity introduce his face to the grass. He got up cursing. I put him down again. The second landing included more dirt. He kept shouting about his status, his company, his connections, and all the terrible things he could do to me. I had heard rich people threaten poor people before. It always sounded impressive until you became richer than they were. When he reached for me again, I caught his hair and drove his face into the lawn hard enough to convince him that landscaping was not a combat sport. Xu Lei screamed at me to stop. She said Zhao was a 4-star citizen and a senior executive at Brilliant Entertainment. I finally released him, not because of his title, because I had already made my point and did not enjoy wasting effort. He promised revenge as I walked away. I told him to stand in line. My schedule was getting crowded. That evening, Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang went to Haiyun Hotel with friends. What should have been an ordinary meal turned into a reminder that expensive buildings do not automatically contain civilized people. Ling Shuang went to the restroom to fix her makeup. Another woman stood beside her doing the same thing. When Ling turned, her arm accidentally bumped the woman's cosmetic case. Powder and makeup spilled, some of it landing on the woman's clothes. Ling apologized immediately and offered to pay for cleaning. The woman slapped her. That was the part Su Qingyao walked in on. Su has many flaws. Watching her best friend get hit is not one of them. She asked what happened, heard the insult, saw the mark on Ling's face, and went from 0 to hurricane with impressive efficiency. The argument became a fight. 2 against 1 was not favorable mathematics for the other woman. She ended up crying, furious, and calling her boyfriend. That boyfriend was Zhu Gang. general manager of Shangxi Construction. He arrived with 4 men and the posture of someone who had spent years confusing other people's caution with proof of his greatness. By then, Su and Ling had realized the situation might be serious. Haiyun catered to wealthy clients. Anyone comfortable bringing several aggressive men into a 5-star hotel probably did not believe consequences applied to him. They called me repeatedly. I was in a noisy room and missed the first calls. When I finally saw the stack of notifications, my stomach tightened. People do not call 10 times in a row to discuss dessert. I headed toward the restroom corridor immediately. By the time I arrived, Zhu Gang had followed the women inside and was kicking at the locked stall door while shouting threats. His version of compensation had already moved far beyond damaged clothing. He wanted humiliation, control, and, judging from what he was saying, access to 2 women who had told him no. I pushed past the men blocking the entrance. Move. Something in my face convinced the first 2. Zhu Gang turned. Su Qingyao opened the stall door. The instant she recognized my voice, she and Ling came out together. Su looked furious and frightened at the same time. Ling's cheeks still carried the mark from the earlier slap. I felt my temper go cold. Hot anger makes people loud. Cold anger makes me careful. I asked Su to tell me what happened. She did. Zhu Gang interrupted twice, calling the women liars and demanding that I mind my own business. I looked at him. They are my business. He laughed. He told me his position, his connections, and the citizen status of people he knew. Then he threatened to cripple me if I did not apologize. Rich bullies love resumes. Apparently intimidation requires LinkedIn now. I asked whether he had really told Su and Ling that they could make things right by spending the night with him. He did not deny it. Instead, he smirked and asked what I planned to do about it. That answered the moral portion of the exam. He called his men forward. There were 5 of them, including Zhu. Before the system, I might have calculated exits. With max fitness and ancient Tai Chi, I calculated distance. The first man threw a wide punch. I redirected his arm and sent him into the wall without needing a full strike. The second rushed from my left. I stepped inside, took his balance, and dropped him onto the floor. The third hesitated. Smartest man in the group. Unfortunately, Zhu shouted at him. He came anyway. A short body shot folded him. The fourth tried grabbing me from behind. I rotated, broke the grip, and put him down beside his friends. Zhu Gang stared. 5 seconds earlier he had been conducting business negotiations with his fists. Now 4 members of the negotiating committee were horizontal. He charged in anger. I kicked him backward. He hit the floor hard enough to lose both momentum and most of his confidence. The corridor went quiet. Su Qingyao's eyes were bright. Ling Shuang stared at me as though somebody had replaced her boyfriend with an action movie stunt double during dinner. Zhu Gang tried getting up while swearing revenge. I let him speak. Threats are useful when people volunteer intelligence. He made sure I knew he was general manager of Shangxi Construction, and that people like me did not understand what kind of company stood behind him. That detail interested me. I did not beat him again. I took Su and Ling home. Violence had solved the immediate problem. It had not solved tomorrow. At the villa, Su wanted to celebrate my 1 versus 5 performance. Ling wanted ice for her cheek. I wanted information. I searched Shangxi Construction. The subsidiary belonged to Shangxi Group, one of Haikin's major diversified corporate powers. Its businesses stretched across real estate, hotels, entertainment, retail, finance, technology, and manufacturing. Zhu Gang was small compared with the group itself. That was exactly the problem. If he used corporate contacts to retaliate against Su or Ling while I was in class, punching him tonight would not protect them tomorrow. Hiring bodyguards was possible. Living permanently beside them was not. Then I remembered the forced purchase card sitting in my system inventory. I stared at the screen. Then I started laughing. There are many ways to deal with a manager who threatens your family. Buying his parent company is not usually listed in conflict resolution textbooks. My system had never respected textbooks. I checked Shangxi Group's ownership structure and valuation. The company was worth on the order of 100 billion credits. Its chairman controlled roughly 40%. A 20% stake would make me the second largest shareholder. Under normal conditions, buying that position would have cost an absurd fortune and triggered complicated negotiations. The forced purchase card reduced the required price to 10% of ordinary value and handled the transaction through legal channels. I had more than 2 billion credits available. Enough. System. Purchased 20% of Shangxi Group. The confirmation appeared. 2 billion credits vanished. A thick set of shareholder documents appeared in my hands while federal registries updated electronically. I read the ownership percentage 3 times. 20%. One night, I had been threatened by a subsidiary manager. Before midnight, I had become one of the most powerful owners above him. That was not revenge. That was vertical integration. Su Qingyao walked into the study while I was still looking at the documents. What are you smiling about? I solved Zhu Gang. You killed him? I stared at her. Why is that your first guess? She shrugged. Concerning. I handed her the documents. She read the first page, froze, then looked at me. You bought Shangxi Group. 20%. Because one manager pissed you off? When you say it like that, it sounds impulsive. It is impulsive. Ling Shuang came in, read the papers, and sat down silently. Then she began laughing. What? Su asked. Ling wiped the corner of one eye. I'm imagining Zhu Gang waking up tomorrow. That image improved my mood enormously. The next morning, Shangxi Group's executive office contacted me before I contacted them. A new 20% shareholder appearing overnight tends to make senior management curious. I accepted a meeting. Shangxi headquarters was all glass, steel, quiet assistants, and expensive furniture, designed to remind visitors that decisions made there could move thousands of jobs. Several executives expected an older investor. Instead, they got a 21-year-old student. The skepticism was visible. I understood it. If I were them, I would have suspected somebody's spoiled heir had wandered into corporate governance carrying supernatural paperwork. Technically, they would only have been wrong about spoiled. That was where I properly met Jiang Cheng. She did not flatter me. She evaluated me. The system immediately confirmed that she met Red Beauty standards, but her face was not what held my attention longest. Her control did. She listened before speaking, asked precise questions, and seemed almost allergic to wasted words. When Zhu Gang's name came up, I explained the previous evening in full. I did not demand instant punishment. I asked for records, security footage, past complaints. Whether he had ever used company employees or resources for personal intimidation, the review produced more than one complaint. Some had been ignored because Zhu Gang delivered financial results and maintained useful relationships. That irritated me more than his insults. One bad man is a personal problem. An institution that repeatedly looks away becomes a system problem. I voted for removal. Jiang Cheng supported the decision. Enough directors followed. Zhu Gang lost the position he had used as armor. I made one thing clear to the room. I would not use Shangxi as a private revenge club, but nobody working under a company I owned would be protected for using its name to threaten women, customers, or weaker employees. Profit did not purchase immunity from basic standards. An older executive studied me for a moment. You're more serious than the rumors suggested. The rumors mostly involve cars. That earned a few laughs and loosened the room. Afterward, Jiang Cheng invited me to her office. Why Shangxi? She asked. I could have given her a polished speech about strategic diversification. I tried. She watched me for 3 seconds. And the real reason? I sighed. I had a card that made it extremely cheap, and one of your managers threatened my girlfriends. There was a pause. Then Jiang Cheng laughed. Not the polite executive laugh. A real one. At least you're honest. I'm still working on sounding sophisticated. Don't. We have enough people who sound sophisticated. That was the first conversation where I began seeing Jiang Cheng as more than another name on a system panel. She knew business in ways I did not. The Shangxi paperwork gave me power, but that night I did something far less strategic. I painted. The system had pushed my art skill far beyond the level the original Jiang Cheng possessed. Technique now arrived almost automatically. Proportion, light, edge control, color temperature, composition. For the first time, my hands could keep up with what my eyes wanted to say. Naturally, I needed a model. I asked Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang which one of them wanted the honor. Ling Shuang vanished upstairs so quickly that I briefly admired her cardio. Su Qingyao was half a second slower. That is how history chooses victims. Why me? Because Ling has better survival instincts. She threw a cushion at me. I set up the easel in the third-floor studio and arranged the lighting. I wanted a classical figure study, tasteful, private, focused on form and expression rather than cheap provocation. Su still became nervous the moment she realized how long she would need to hold one pose. For someone who could wear an attention-grabbing outfit through a crowded campus without blinking, being observed quietly by one person affected her far more. That interested me. Public confidence and private vulnerability are not opposites. Sometimes they are roommates. She sat sideways on a chair, one hand supporting her chin, the other relaxed near her knee. I adjusted the drape and told her not to move. How long? Until art happens. That sounds fake. Most artist statements do. She rolled her eyes but stayed still. I began. The room became quiet, except for the brush against canvas and the occasional complaint when her leg went numb. At first, I noticed obvious things. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her posture, the way warm light caught the edge of her face. Then I noticed smaller ones. She bit the inside of her cheek when trying not to speak. Her confident smile disappeared when nobody was watching except me. Without an audience, she looked younger. Less like Haikin University's glamorous fox beauty, and more like a 21-year-old woman, uncertain whether the person painting her truly saw her or only the image she liked presenting. That realization changed the portrait. I softened some lines, left others sharper, made the expression less seductive than she expected and more thoughtful. When I finally stopped, Sue stretched dramatically and demanded immediate release from artistic imprisonment. Then she came behind me to look. Silence. I glanced sideways. Her eyes widened. That's me. Unless somebody else has been sitting there for 2 hours. She ignored the joke. The painting was recognizably Su Qingyao, but not the version from selfies, campus gossip, or carefully selected social media angles. It carried her confidence without turning it into arrogance and her beauty without making beauty the only subject. She stared for so long that I began feeling self-conscious. Say something. You made me look better than I do. Technically, I made you look like how I see you. That sentence escaped before I could evaluate it. Sue turned toward me. The system chimed softly. Affection rose. I almost laughed at the timing. She asked whether I had been practicing secretly. I told her talent occasionally blossoms when adequately funded. You bought painting skill too? If only universities offered that package. She looked at the portrait again. Then she asked whether she could keep it. I hesitated, only to annoy her. She immediately grabbed my sleeve. It's me. Obviously, I get it. The artist owns the copyright. I'm your girlfriend, not a recognized intellectual property category. She threatened to tell everyone I painted her badly. I signed the corner and gave it to her. She smiled with such uncomplicated happiness that the entire evening felt more valuable than the canvas. Later, I realized the session mattered because it was one of the first times I gave Sue something that was not purchased. No car, no jewelry, no five-star reservation, just attention, time, and a piece of myself translated through paint. For a woman who had spent years measuring security through material things, she treated that painting with surprising care. Money had attracted her loudly. Being seen reached her quietly. I had capital, supernatural shortcuts, and frightening learning speed. She had years of judgment, political awareness, and corporate experience. Instead of pretending I already knew everything, I decided to learn. The system could upgrade skills. It could not manufacture wisdom unless I gave it something worth upgrading. Jiang Cheng became one of the people who helped provide that. Around the same period, my life crossed paths again with a woman I had met under much worse circumstances. Her name was Miao Shushu. The first time I noticed her family, I was walking near a busy road when a little girl suddenly ran toward traffic. An SUV was already coming. There was no time to think. I moved. With my enhanced body, the world seemed slower than it should have. I reached the child, grabbed her, and twisted away from the vehicle's path. The SUV missed us by what felt like the width of a bad decision. I hit the ground, protecting the girl with my own body. My shirt tore in the process. She cried into my chest while a crowd gathered. Then Miao Shushu arrived. She saw her daughter clinging to a half-dressed stranger and reacted exactly as an alarmed mother might. She yanked the child away and glared at me. For half a second, I considered explaining. Then I looked at the crowd, looked at her, and decided that dignity had already suffered enough for one afternoon. I walked away. The witnesses explained everything after I left. They told her I had thrown myself into traffic without hesitation. They told her the child would almost certainly have died if I had been slower. By the time Miao Shushu searched for me later, her anger had turned into embarrassment and gratitude. The system also revealed that she qualified as a Red Beauty. She was older than me, divorced, and raising her daughter alone. That did not bother me. Life had already taught me that marital status was less important than character. And character, unlike beauty, did not come with a convenient score. Our second major meeting happened through my bank. After my investment profits, my account had become large enough that the branch suddenly remembered I existed. Banks are funny that way. When you owe them money, they call you constantly. When you have billions, they call you sir and offer beverages you did not ask for. Miao Shushu was a senior bank manager. She was assigned to handle my private account relationship. The private banking appointment that reunited us was almost comical from Miao Shushu's side. Her branch manager had apparently spent the morning reminding everyone that a multi-billion credit client could not be treated like a normal walk-in customer. Fresh tea appeared. A private room was prepared. Senior staff checked their clothes twice. Then I walked through the door and Miao Shushu recognized the young man she had accidentally glared at after he saved her daughter. Her professional smile froze. Mine did not. We meet again. She looked as if she wanted to hide under the banking table. Mr. Jiang, I didn't know it was you. The child abduction suspect from the intersection? Her face turned red. Please don't say it like that. I laughed and let her off the hook. She apologized properly anyway. That apology told me a lot about her. She could have hidden behind misunderstanding or maternal panic. Instead, she admitted she had judged me unfairly. The account discussion came next. She explained premium deposit services, investment options, high-tier lending, secure transfers, and benefits available because of my citizen rating. I listened more carefully than she expected. The Red Beauty system could generate opportunities, but I still needed ordinary financial systems to move real money safely. I asked specific questions about liquidity limits and institutional exposure. Her posture changed. I was not simply a lucky heir who had stumbled into billions. At least, not entirely. She later admitted that this was the moment she became curious about me personally. Saving Jiang Cheng had made me heroic in her memory. Understanding finance made me less like a fairy tale stranger and more like an adult she could respect. After the formal meeting, I asked whether she had eaten lunch. She said she was working. I pointed out that eating usually improves continued employment. We went nearby. The conversation moved away from money. She told me about Jiang Cheng, her divorce, the pressure of raising a child while building a banking career, and how exhausting it could be to have everyone praise independent women while still expecting them to solve every practical problem alone. I understood the feeling from a different angle. Independence is often celebrated most loudly by people who have no intention of helping. I told her that needing support did not cancel strength. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked about my family. That question was harder. The body I inherited had its own painful history. My blue star life had another. Both versions of Jiang Cheng had known what it meant to grow without stable parents. I gave her a simplified truth. I understood loneliness and did not want to build my future around it. That answer became important later when I proposed a relationship. I was younger than her by years. She had a child. She expected those facts to make me hesitate. They did not. When I asked directly whether she would consider being with me, she thought I was teasing. I listed the practical complications before she could. Yes, I was younger. Yes, my household was unconventional. Yes, public gossip could be annoying. No, I did not need her money. No, Jiang Cheng was not a burden. And no, I was not asking because I wanted a temporary fantasy involving an older woman. That final point made her blush and threaten to end lunch. I apologized. Slightly. She did not agree that day. I did not pressure her. Instead, I kept showing up, not constantly, not theatrically, just reliably. A message asking whether Jiang Cheng's fever had passed. A ride when Meow worked late. A small gift for the child that did not cost more than her mother's monthly salary. Because I was learning that excessive spending can make gratitude feel like debt. Eventually, Meow Xiu stopped seeing the age difference first. She started seeing me. That was when her answer changed. The first time she realized I was the same young man who had saved her daughter, she froze. I asked whether the bank's premium service included apologizing for previous death stares. Her face turned red. Then she laughed. That laugh changed the atmosphere between us. She was careful around me at first, not cold, careful. A divorced mother with responsibilities did not have the luxury of making reckless romantic decisions. I respected that, but the system hanging over my life made me unusually direct. I told her I liked her. She thought I was joking. I told her I had made worse financial decisions with much less confidence. That got another laugh. Gradually, her affection rose. I spent time with her and Jiang Cheng without pretending the child was an inconvenience. If anything, Jiang Cheng seemed to decide I belonged in their lives before her mother did. Children have frighteningly efficient social algorithms. One afternoon, she grabbed my hand and asked why I did not visit every day. Meow Xiu nearly choked on her tea. I told Jiang Cheng that adults had jobs. She informed me that being rich meant I did not need one. I had no counter-argument. Eventually, Meow Xiu agreed to become part of my life. The system recognized her. Another red beauty, another layer of security against the ridiculous death condition. But by then, she was no longer simply insurance to me. That realization made me uncomfortable. The system had turned relationships into numbers, rewards, and thresholds. Real people refused to stay inside those neat boxes. I could see affection percentages. I still could not quantify trust. That was probably for the best. Meanwhile, my agreement with Xiao Ru remained unresolved. Our school announced a mandatory outdoor sketching trip to Qixia Mountain, 3 days and 2 nights. She would supervise the class. I would attend as a student, and somewhere between those two facts sat our modeling bet like a loaded joke waiting for the right moment. Before the trip, I finished arranging Su Qingyao's promised dinner at Haiyun. The class dinner itself became a small demonstration of how quickly social hierarchy changed once money entered the room. Su's classmates arrived expecting a nice meal and perhaps a glimpse of the mysterious boyfriend who had financed her recent confidence. Haiyun was not simply expensive. It was one of those places where the lobby alone made students check whether their shoes were clean. The hostess recognized my reservation and let us through without hesitation. Several classmates began whispering immediately. I heard my name. Porsche, inheritance, and, is that really him? More than once. Su Qingyao heard everything too. She became visibly taller without changing height. The private room was already prepared with premium dishes and drinks. I had intentionally chosen quality without turning the meal into a vulgar mountain of food. Students thanked me with varying levels of awkwardness. Some knew me from campus as the guy who used to chase Su like a full-time occupation. Seeing that same person arrive with a 6-star bracelet and a LaFerrari parked outside required mental adjustment. One classmate finally asked how much the car cost. Su answered before I could. Of course she did. She knew the prices of my vehicles better than I knew the birthdays of several relatives whose memories I had inherited. Someone teased her about becoming a wealthy wife. She denied being materialistic with such obvious materialistic happiness that even Ling Shuang covered a smile. I leaned towards Su and whispered, subtle, very subtle. She kicked my shoe under the table. The dinner helped me see a change in her beyond greed. When classmates praised me, she looked proud rather than merely possessive. When someone made a joke about the old Jiang Cheng being a simp, her expression hardened before mine did. She defended me. He treated me well because he wanted to. Don't make fun of him for that. That caught me off guard. The original Jiang Cheng had humiliated himself often, yes, but he had also loved sincerely. I had inherited his anger towards Su, but also his memories of every small kindness he had offered without calculation. Hearing her protect those memories softened something in me, not enough to forget her flaws. Enough to stop reducing her to them. After dinner, she waited until the classmates had left before slipping her hand into mine. You weren't embarrassed by what they said about before? I shrugged. A man who survives his past doesn't need to pretend it never happened. She became quiet, then she apologized again for how she had treated me. This time, there was no Porsche key in her hand and no audience watching. That apology mattered more. The system gave only a small affection increase. Human progress, apparently, did not always come with fireworks. I preferred it that way. Ling Shuang stayed behind too. She had been watching Su and me with her usual cool expression. When Su stepped away to take a call, Ling asked whether I was actually forgiving her. I'm allowing her to become better. That's different. And if she doesn't, then I stop allowing it. Ling nodded. She understood boundaries better than Su did. That was one of the reasons I trusted her. She reminded me of the Porsche promise I had made when asking her to become my girlfriend. I told her the car was still hers if she wanted it. She said Su had effectively kidnapped it. I promised to buy another vehicle, rather than start a civil war over keys. Ling laughed quietly. You solve too many problems with money. It has an excellent success rate, until the problem is a person. That sentence stayed with me. I had already learned that lesson with Su. The system's wealth made it easy to create affection quickly among people attracted to status. But money could not guarantee the kind of loyalty that held when the money stopped being impressive. That distinction would matter more and more as my life grew dangerous. When she arrived with classmates and discovered the reservation was real, she practically glowed. The students expected a wealthy boyfriend. They did not expect a 6-star citizen younger than most graduate students. I kept the details limited. If I had learned anything, it was that money attracted attention faster than blood attracted mosquitoes. Unfortunately, attention had already become one of my recurring hobbies. A later lunch brought Jiang Cheng back into my path. The lunch with Jiang Cheng was a masterclass in how confidence collapses when its assumptions fail one by one. I arrived at the Western restaurant to meet Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang. By pure bad luck, Zhao and Xu Lele reached the entrance at almost the same time. Xu accused me of following them. I asked why anyone would voluntarily follow a couple whose previous meeting location had been a bush behind an academic building. She turned red. Zhao warned me not to joke about what I had seen. I reminded him that I had no interest in publicizing it unless he kept threatening me. Mutually assured embarrassment proved surprisingly effective diplomacy. Inside, I joined Su and Ling by the window. Ling sat beside me. I put an arm around her naturally. Su, instead of objecting, poured me water and began discussing the menu. From across the room, Zhao watched the scene with complete confusion. Xu Lele explained that Su was supposedly my girlfriend. That only confused him more. Why was I holding Ling while Su behaved as if nothing was wrong? I could practically see his worldview buffering. Then he learned Su Qingyao had a reputation for loving money. His confidence returned. Bad sign. He walked to our table, introduced himself as a vice president at Brilliant Entertainment, praised Su's beauty, and immediately began suggesting she deserved a richer man than a poor student like me. I leaned back and let him continue. Sometimes, the fastest way to defeat an idiot is to give him enough room to complete the presentation. Zhao produced the key to an Audi A8. He said Su could drive it whenever she wanted if she left me. Not own it, drive it. Su looked at the key, then at him. Then she quietly opened her bag and placed the Porsche 918 key on the table. Sorry, she said. I'm used to the Porsche. Other cars hurt my back. Ling lowered her head. I knew that posture. She was trying not to laugh. Zhao's smile froze. Su was not finished. He tried to recover by suggesting the Porsche might belong to her family. She immediately wrapped both arms around mine and announced that the Porsche belonged to me. Then she mentioned the LaFerrari. Zhao stared. I could have ended the scene there. Su could not. She asked why a man driving a broken Audi was acting like a billionaire. She wondered aloud whether Brilliant Entertainment hired executives who had never seen supercars before. Each sentence was delivered with the innocent cruelty of someone enjoying a hobby. Zhao turned toward me and tried one last attack. If the cars were really connected to Su, he said, then perhaps I was simply a kept man living off a wealthy girlfriend. That was when Su became genuinely angry. She could insult me herself, apparently. Outsourcing was forbidden. I don't even like yelling at my husband. Who are you to insult him? I glanced at her. She noticed and looked proud. Then, because I am not morally superior to cheap comedy, I added that Zhao should not feel bad. People who have been poor a long time are naturally surprised when they see expensive things. We should be understanding. His face darkened so dramatically, I worried the restaurant lighting had changed. A nearby customer coughed to hide laughter. Zhao left shortly afterward with Xu Lele. He had come to our table planning to steal my girlfriend with an Audi. He departed, having been publicly educated on supercar pricing by the woman he tried to impress. On the way out, Xu Lele looked back at me with a complicated expression. 3 years earlier, she had reportedly liked the original Jiang Cheng and been rejected because he was obsessed with Su. Now she was watching Su and Ling sit comfortably beside a man whose life had changed beyond recognition. I felt no need to gloat. Choices create roads. We were simply on different ones. After Zhao left, Su immediately asked how well she had performed. I told her she had been terrifying. She interpreted that as praise. Correctly. Ling commented that Su had finally discovered a productive use for her materialism. Weaponized class snobbery against people who deserved it. Su threw a napkin at her. I laughed hard enough that other tables looked over. That meal did more for our household chemistry than several serious talks. Su realized I appreciated her loyalty when it mattered. Ling realized Su could accept the new relationship without constant resentment. And I learned that sometimes I did not need to fight anyone. I could simply let Su Qingyao talk until the enemy surrendered. As Chixia Mountain approached, my schedule became absurd. I had school, investments, girlfriends, corporate matters, and a system that kept dropping supernatural objects into my life like a board game master. I should have been exhausted. Instead, max fitness made sleep feel almost optional. I began to understand how dangerous convenience could be. When normal limits disappear, ambition stops receiving natural warning signs, and mine had never been small. The Keisha trip began with the ordinary chaos of a college field excursion. Luggage, attendance checks, students fighting over seats, and one teacher pretending she was not already regretting every career choice that had led to this bus. I chose a seat where I could see Xiao Ru. She noticed. Her look clearly said, "Do not start." My smile clearly answered, "No promises." A girl named Yang Xiaowei tried to sit close to me and chat. She was friendly and attractive, but I had no intention of manufacturing complications just because the system had trained my life to resemble a dating simulator designed by a drunk accountant. I remained polite and kept boundaries. That choice did not escape Xiaoru's notice. For some reason, she looked faintly pleased. The bus climbed toward Chixia Mountain, leaving the city behind. The landscape turned greener, the roads narrower, and everyone's phone signal weaker. Civilization was slowly being replaced by cliffs, trees, and students asking how much longer the drive would take. Then, traffic stopped. A group of local men had blocked part of the road. The argument started over access, payment, or some local grievance that quickly became less important than the fact that several people were getting aggressive. Our driver did not want trouble. The students definitely did not want trouble. Xiaoru stepped off the bus. The roadblock incident revealed more than Xiaoru intended. The bus had entered a narrow section where the mountain road curved between a slope and a drop. Several villagers or local toughs had positioned vehicles and improvised barriers across the route, forcing traffic to stop. At first, nobody treated it as dangerous. Our driver opened the window and asked what was happening. Voices rose. Money was mentioned, access fees, local disputes, outsiders using the road. Everyone seemed to have a different explanation. The details mattered less once one of the men struck the side of the bus and ordered everyone out. Students became quiet. College bravado disappears quickly when an argument stops being theoretical. Several boys whispered about calling police. Someone checked signal strength. Poor. Of course. Danger always prefers scenic locations with weak reception. Xiaoru walked to the front. The driver told her to stay inside. She ignored him. I stood too. She looked back once. Stay on the bus. I'm coming. No. The word carried enough authority that I paused. Then she stepped outside alone. Through the windshield, I watched her speak calmly to the men. She did not posture or threaten. She asked them to move the barrier and let the students pass. One man laughed. Another looked her over in a way that made my jaw tighten. He reached toward her arm. What happened next lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Xiaoru caught his wrist, turned her body, and dropped him without visible effort. A second man rushed. She stepped inside his momentum and sent him over her hip. A third swung something. She moved before the strike completed, hit a pressure point or joint, and the object fell from his hand. Students behind me started shouting. I did not. I was watching technique. Ancient Tai Chi had given me enough martial understanding to recognize that Xiaoru was not merely good at fighting. Her control was exceptional. She used exactly enough force. No wasted movement, no panic, no anger. Within moments, the men who had approached her aggressively were either on the ground or reconsidering life choices at a safer distance. She did not chase anyone. She pointed at the barrier. They moved it. Then she returned to the bus. The class erupted with questions. Teacher Xiao, what was that? Did you learn martial arts? Are you secretly in the military? She answered none of them. She sat down and told the driver to continue. The bus moved. I leaned into the aisle. Teacher. She closed her eyes. Don't. I just wanted to compliment your instructional versatility. Fine arts and organized violence. Very interdisciplinary. Several students laughed. Xiaoru opened one eye. Would you like an individual demonstration? I sat back immediately. Excellent boundary setting, teacher. The humor helped the class release fear, but I kept thinking about what I had seen. Her age, confidence, political hints, physical ability, and the way dangerous men had failed to surprise her all pointed toward a life much larger than campus. That mystery intensified my attraction, but not because power itself was sexy. It was because I realized I had been looking at only one slice of her. People are more interesting when the first impression is wrong. Later, when we spoke privately, I asked whether she had been in real fights before. Yes. How many? Enough. Helpful answer. She told me some parts of her background could not be discussed casually. I accepted that, but asked one more question. Were you ever actually in danger out there? She considered. No. That answer landed with more force than any bragging would have. She had controlled the confrontation from the first movement. I thought about my system-enhanced fitness and new Tai Chi knowledge. Power had made me confident quickly. Xiaoru's composure showed what confidence looked like after years of discipline. There was a difference. I wanted to close it. I expected negotiation. Instead, I discovered that my beautiful art instructor had apparently hidden an action movie inside her resume. One man reached toward her. I barely saw her move. His wrist twisted, his balance vanished, and he hit the ground before his expression had time to update. Another man rushed forward. She turned, stepped, and redirected him with terrifying ease. The entire confrontation ended in seconds. I stared through the bus window. My internal file on Xiaoru had just been deleted and replaced with a large question mark. She came back aboard, straightened her clothes, and told everyone to sit down. Nobody argued. Not even me. For approximately 4 minutes. Then I leaned over and whispered that she had excellent footwork. Her eyes narrowed. You saw too much. I study art, I said. Observation is part of the curriculum. She threatened to deduct points. I reminded her that academic grading should not be used to suppress eyewitnesses. Her mouth twitched despite herself. That was the moment I realized Xiaoru was carrying far more secrets than I had imagined. Chixia was beautiful. Old stone streets wound between traditional buildings, mountain air moved through narrow alleys, and the evening light made every rooftop look as if it had been designed for a painting. Our assignment was simple. Observe, sketch, produce work, and do not create scandals. The last rule was not written down. It should have been. We checked into our lodging and spent the day working outdoors. I had already used system points to improve several skills, but painting still lagged behind where I wanted it. Xiaoru's teasing challenge bothered me. Professional level 9 sounded impossible to a normal student. I was not operating on a normal student's upgrade economy. I spent points. Knowledge entered my mind in layers. Composition, anatomy, values, color relationships, brush discipline, visual storytelling. My hands remembered techniques I had never physically practiced. It was unsettling. Talent usually came from years of failure. The system gave me the harvest without the seasons. I could not decide whether that was a miracle or theft. Then I painted. The question stopped mattering. For several hours, everything around me narrowed into shape, light, and rhythm. When I finally stepped back, even I was surprised by the result. Xiaoru approached expecting to critique my work. She stopped speaking. That silence was better than applause. She examined the painting closely, then examined me. When did you learn to do this? I had a productive afternoon. She looked as if she wanted to throw my easel into the river. Students gathered. Whispers spread. Someone asked whether I had secretly hired a master to finish it. I took that as a compliment. Xiaoru, however, knew I had painted it in front of everyone. The old bet returned immediately. I smiled. She sighed. You're really not going to forget that, are you? Teacher, memory is one of my strongest academic skills. She called me shameless. I thanked her for noticing my consistency. That evening, students gathered at a local bar called Jiang Cheng. It was less wild nightclub and more young people on a school trip, trying very hard to appear mature. Drinks arrived. Someone suggested truth or dare. Human civilization has invented electricity, antibiotics, and spacecraft. It has also invented truth or dare, proving progress is never linear. Questions became increasingly personal. People asked about crushes, first loves, secret relationships, and who in the class seemed most attractive. I avoided enough traps to qualify for diplomatic service, then someone dragged Xiaoru into the game. Watching students interrogate their instructor about romance was like watching children poke a sleeping tiger with chopsticks. She answered calmly. Mostly. Whenever someone mentioned younger men, her eyes seemed to find me by accident. I pretended not to notice. My survival instincts were developing. At some point, the bar's music equipment became available. Someone learned that I could sing. That rumor spread faster than fire in dry grass. I tried to refuse. The room started chanting. So I gave in. I chose a song from my old world. In this world, nobody had heard it. That gave me an unfair advantage almost as large as the system itself. The first notes quieted the room. I stopped thinking about the people around me. Music had been one of the few things my previous life understood without needing wealth, status, or supernatural help. I sang with that memory. When the song ended, the room stayed silent for a heartbeat. Then applause hit me like weather. Among the listeners was a woman I had not noticed before, Lu Ruolin. She was older, polished, and carried the sharp attention of someone who evaluated talent professionally. She worked in entertainment management. She asked where I had learned the song. I told her I wrote it. Technically, in this world, that answer was difficult to challenge. Her expression changed immediately. She asked whether I had considered becoming a singer. I said I was currently busy, surviving college, managing investments, and losing arguments with my teacher. Xiaoru kicked my ankle under the table. Lu Ruolin laughed. That was our first real conversation. The next morning, the official sketch assignment began. Every student had to submit one finished piece before the trip ended. Subject was unrestricted: people, architecture, landscape, still life, anything, provided the work was honestly produced on location. Our teacher, naturally, announced the rules and then began strolling through the old town carrying only a handbag. The students carried boards, paper, tools, water, snacks, and the weight of academic responsibility. Xiaoru carried vibes. I watched her stop at a shop and casually examine souvenirs while the rest of us hunted for composition. Teacher, I called. Shouldn't you be supervising? She smiled. I am supervising. From a distance. That's called tourism. Careful. I grade you. Corruption remained alive and well in education. I chose a street where old stone steps descended between dark timber buildings. Laundry shifted in the mountain breeze. A red lantern moved slightly under an eave. A child sat near a doorway eating something sticky and watching tourists with deep suspicion. The scene had no obvious grandeur. That was why I liked it. Good art, I had begun to understand, did not require extraordinary subjects. It required attention strong enough to make the ordinary impossible to ignore. I blocked in the composition lightly. Students nearby worked with the tense seriousness of people who knew every line might become a grade. I worked differently now. After system-assisted skill growth, my hand followed intention almost perfectly. But technical ease created a new problem. If every stroke was correct, the picture could still feel dead. I had to decide what mattered. The old street was not beautiful because of architecture alone. It felt lived in. So I painted the human traces, the worn threshold, chipped paint, the child's half-finished snack, a broom leaning against a wall, a pair of shoes outside a door. Xiaoru eventually found me. She stood behind my shoulder without announcing herself. I knew she was there because her perfume arrived before her criticism. For a long time she said nothing, then she asked me to move aside. I did. She studied the page closely. You weren't this good last week. People improve. Not like this. Maybe your teaching finally worked. She looked offended by the compliment because we both knew it was weaponized. Then she pointed at the child's hand in the composition. This is the best part. I had expected her to praise technique. Instead, she praised the one thing I had chosen emotionally. That told me she really did understand art. My respect for her grew another notch. Later, students gathered around when someone noticed the painting. One classmate asked whether I had secretly been taking professional lessons. Another accused me of hiding my ability so I could shock everyone during the exam. I told them I enjoyed dramatic reveals. That answer was true enough. Yang Xiaowei hovered nearby, clearly interested in spending more time with me. She asked if we could sketch together the next day. I declined gently. I had enough relationships to manage, and encouraging a classmate because I enjoyed attention would have been selfish. She looked disappointed but accepted it. Xiaoru witnessed the exchange from several meters away. When we were alone later, she asked why I refused. Because she likes me. That's exactly why most boys would agree. Most boys don't have my administrative burden. Xiaoru nearly laughed into her drink. At Qingqing Bar that night, truth or dare became more dangerous as people grew comfortable. The card system was simple. Draw the wrong card, answer the question, or complete the dare. In practice, it functioned as a publicly funded investigation into everyone's romantic life. A student named Yang Tao drew the joker and immediately became drunk on authority. He demanded to know who held a certain card, grinning like a prosecutor who had just found evidence. Unfortunately for me, attention soon shifted in my direction. Questions began harmlessly. Did I have a girlfriend? I hesitated. The technically correct answer required a flowchart. I said my relationship status was complicated. The table exploded. Someone asked whether Su Qingyao was still my girlfriend. Yes. Someone else asked about Ling Shuang. I suddenly became fascinated by the condensation on my glass. Xiao Ru sat nearby, looking far too entertained. Then the game turned on her. A student asked whether she had ever dated someone younger. She answered no. At that time, technically accurate. Then someone asked whether she could ever like a student. The bar went quiet. Xiao Ru lifted her drink, took one calm sip, and said, "A teacher liking a student's potential is normal. Anything else depends on the student graduating first." Everyone laughed. Her eyes met mine for half a second. My heart did something stupid. That answer was not a confession. It was also not nothing. Later, after I sang, Lu Ruolin remained behind while students moved between tables. She did not flatter me immediately. Instead, she asked technical questions. Who arranged the song? Me. Who wrote the melody? Me. Who wrote the lyrics? Also me. She narrowed her eyes. You're either lying or you're wasting your life in the art department. I told her those were not mutually exclusive possibilities. She introduced herself properly and explained her work, talent management, artist development, industry contacts. She had spent years identifying people with market potential and even longer watching companies ruin that potential through bad decisions. She believed I could become valuable quickly. I asked whether she meant artistically or financially. Both. At least she was honest. The next day, we encountered her again outside town. She had come to Kishia partly for work and partly for a short break. During a walk on uneven mountain ground, she twisted her ankle badly enough that she could not continue comfortably. When I found her, she was trying to pretend the injury was minor. People in management apparently believe limping becomes professional if you do it confidently. I crouched to inspect the ankle. Swelling had already begun. She insisted she could walk down herself. I told her that was an excellent plan if her long-term career goal involved permanent joint damage. She glared. I offered to carry her. That embarrassed her more than the injury. I exaggerated the risk until she finally accepted. Then I lifted her in a bridal carry. Her arms automatically went around my neck. Her face turned red enough to challenge the sunset. I had my painting equipment strapped across my back and asked her to hold the remaining case. So we descended the mountain, looking like the world's strangest traveling art advertisement. Tourists stared. Some smiled. One elderly woman gave Lu Ruolin an approving thumbs up. Lu buried her face against my shoulder. This is humiliating. You wanted to walk on the injured ankle. That would have been medically humiliating. Stop talking. Manager Lu, communication is important. I can still hit you. Your hands appear functional, yes. She laughed despite herself. At a small clinic in Kishia town, an older doctor examined the ankle and confirmed there was no fracture or serious ligament damage. Rest, medication, avoid unnecessary strain. Lu Ruolin asked 3 times whether she would recover fully. The doctor finally told her, "Young lady, your ankle is less worried than you are." I almost applauded. That small incident changed our relationship more than the first music conversation. Professional interest became personal trust. She had seen me act without an audience or business benefit. I had seen her drop the polished manager persona and become simply a worried woman who hated losing control. Those glimpses matter. A relationship is often built from the moments when nobody is performing well. By the end of the evening, she had my contact information and several ideas about my future that I had not authorized. Talent agents, I learned, are professionally incapable of seeing a person without also seeing a schedule. The night grew late. Students returned to their rooms in groups. Circumstances, room arrangements, and a sequence of choices I will politely describe as poor administrative planning left Xiao Ru and me spending far more time alone than either of us had publicly intended. Our conversation began with art. Then it moved to her secret martial ability. She did not explain everything. She admitted only that her background was complicated and that the Federation was larger, more political, and more dangerous than the sheltered world most students saw. I asked why she became an art instructor. Her answer surprised me. Because she liked it. Not every decision needed to serve power. For someone like me, newly obsessed with climbing higher, the answer landed harder than expected. I told her about my childhood memories from this body, the humiliation, poverty, the constant need to endure people with more money or status. I did not mention transmigration. Some truths were too large to hand someone before breakfast. Xiao Ru listened. The teasing disappeared from her face. For once, she saw the ambition beneath my jokes. I wanted enough power that nobody could casually decide my future again. Enough money that poverty could never put a leash around my neck. Enough influence that the people I cared about would not have to beg monsters for mercy. She said that ambition could protect a man or consume him. I told her I planned to eat first. She laughed softly. The tension between us changed. I had flirted with her before, because it was fun, because she was beautiful, because the system had made me reckless. That night felt different. It was not simply attraction. I respected her, and respect made desire far more dangerous. Our relationship crossed a line before the trip ended. I will not pretend it was an accident. We were adults. We both understood what we were choosing. The next morning, however, understanding did not prevent awkwardness. Xiaoru sat on the edge of the bed, silent, while I tried to determine whether offering breakfast would count as bravery or suicide. I chose breakfast. She threw a pillow at me. Progress. What followed was even more surprising. I proposed making the relationship legal. The decision to marry Xiaoru did not happen because one night magically solved our differences. If anything, crossing that line made the differences harder to ignore. She was 30, politically connected, professionally established, and accustomed to carrying responsibility without asking anyone's permission. I was 21, newly rich, newly powerful, technically her student, and living a life that changed direction every 48 hours. On paper, we looked like a terrible idea. I told her that. Finally, she said, "You've developed self-awareness. Don't celebrate too early. I still want to marry you." She stared at me over breakfast. Our lodging room was quiet. Morning light entered through the curtains. Somewhere outside, students were already moving around the old town for their assignments. Inside, we were discussing legal marriage as if there were no class schedule in existence. Xiaoru asked why I wanted to register instead of simply keeping the relationship private. The easiest answer would have been romance. I gave her the more honest one, because secrecy without a future would eventually make her position degrading. If I expected her to take risks for me, hide our relationship professionally, and tolerate the rest of my complicated life, then I needed to offer something firmer than "let's see what happens." She said legal status could not guarantee emotional responsibility. I agreed, but refusing legal responsibility guarantees less. That made her pause. Then she raised the issue of age. "You're 9 years younger. I'll age. That's your solution?" "Very reliable process. Happens every year." She threw a napkin at me. Then came the more serious issue. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang. I did not minimize them. They were not temporary obstacles waiting for the heroine to arrive. They were people I had accepted into my life. Xiaoru wanted to know whether I could actually be fair. I said I could try. She disliked that answer. Then I explained that promising perfect fairness would be a lie. Feelings change. Needs differ. Circumstances shift. I would sometimes fail. What I could promise was honesty, correction, and never deliberately using one woman to punish another. Xiaoru looked at me for a long time. That's a better answer. She asked what I expected from a principal wife. The title sounded political because it was. Under Federation law, the principal wife had recognized authority over household registration and several family-level decisions. I told her I needed someone who could tell me when I was wrong without fearing my money. Someone who understood power but was not dazzled by it. Someone the others could eventually respect. Someone I could trust if I disappeared for a month and came back to discover the house still standing. "So you want a manager? A beautiful manager. Get out." I was already sitting. She sighed and covered her face. Then I told her the final reason. When danger appeared on the mountain road, she moved first. When I spoke about ambition, she warned me instead of flattering me. When I showed talent, she challenged it instead of worshipping it. And when we were alone, I felt less need to perform wealth or confidence. "That's why," I said, "you make me want to become someone who deserves the things I already have." The room became very quiet. Xiaoru looked away toward the window. Her eyes had gone slightly red. "You should have started with that. I needed the bad answers for contrast." She laughed through her nose. Then she agreed. The registration itself took minutes. Our bracelets verified identity, consent, relationship category, and legal status. I signed. She signed. The federal network processed the record. A small confirmation icon appeared. That was marriage in a technologically efficient society. Centuries of human ritual compressed into biometric authentication and a government server. It should have felt anticlimactic. Instead, my heart hammered harder than it had during the Ferrari drift. I looked at Xiaoru. "Wife?" She immediately warned me not to say that in front of students. "Mrs. Jiang." She reached for a pillow. "Teacher wife?" The pillow connected. I considered the marriage successfully inaugurated. Later that day, we returned to our public roles. She was instructor Xiao. I was student Jiang. Nobody around us knew the legal record had changed overnight. That secret created dozens of tiny moments that were more intimate than anything obvious. Passing each other in a hallway and pretending not to know too much. Her correcting my sketch while standing slightly farther away than necessary. My phone buzzing under the table with a message from wife while she lectured at the front. At one point, she caught me smiling at the screen. "Something funny, Jiang Cheng?" My wife sent me a message. Half the class turned around. Xiaoru's expression nearly cracked. "Focus on your work." I did. Mostly. Those moments made the relationship feel real, in a way the registration alone could not. Marriage was not the line on the bracelet. It was a private language developing between us, while ordinary life continued outside it. Back in Haichin, the change affected everything. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang learned that Xiao Ru held the principal wife position. Su was visibly nervous. Ling handled it more calmly, though even she watched Xiao Ru with new caution. Xiao Ru did not bully them. That was the important part. She established boundaries instead. No pointless fighting. No using me as a scoreboard. No sabotaging one another. If we were going to live in a legally bizarre household, we would at least behave better than a reality show reunion episode. I supported that policy enthusiastically. It reduced my odds of waking up to poisoned coffee. The painting promise was finally fulfilled too. Xiao Ru modeled privately. I focused on the work with surprising seriousness. The scene could easily have become embarrassing, but the act of painting changed how I saw her. Instead of reducing her to beauty, I studied posture, expression, patience, the slight tension in her shoulders when she tried not to react to my gaze. Art forced attention without possession. By the end, the portrait felt alive. Xiao Ru stood behind me and stared at it for a long time. Her earlier mockery vanished. "You really surpassed me," she finally said. That acknowledgement meant more than the bet. I had used the system to accelerate the skill, yes, but what I chose to paint had still come from me. That distinction mattered. Not long afterward, she began packing for a trip to the capital. I walked into the bedroom and found clothes arranged around an open suitcase. My mood dropped instantly. She told me she would be gone for more than a month. I demanded to know what kind of meeting required that long. Her answer opened another door into the world she had kept hidden. Xiao Ru was not simply a martial artist with a teaching hobby. Her family and political background ran deep. She was involved with high-level federal affairs and was preparing for matters connected to the federal parliament. Her political explanation was stranger than I expected because the Great Xia Federation did not map neatly onto the governments I remembered from Blue Star. There was no simple president at the top diagram I could memorize in 5 minutes. Authority was distributed through federal institutions, citizen tiers, regional structures, economic blocks, military influence, and an assembly whose members could shape national policy with enormous personal power behind them. Xiao Ru was being prepared as a candidate for that level of public life. I sat on the edge of the bed while she folded clothes and tried to reconcile two images. Teacher Xiao, who confiscated cigarettes and criticized color values, and Xiao Ru, political candidate with martial skill capable of dropping grown men before a bus full of students finished gasping. "Which one is the real you?" I asked. She stopped folding. "Both." That answer was obvious only after she said it. People do not become fake because they contain more than one identity. She genuinely loved art. She genuinely carried family obligations and political ambition. The quiet teacher and the dangerous woman were not disguises over one another. They were layers. I understood because I was becoming layered too. Student, investor, shareholder, singer, husband, system host, transmigrator. Some identities could be public, others could not. Xiao Ru told me the capital trip would involve meetings, candidate preparation, family obligations, and political work that could not be handled remotely. She warned me not to create a national scandal while she was gone. I asked for a definition. No killing, federal officials. That feels unnecessarily specific. No buying a major company without telling me. Already did that once. Exactly. Anything else? She looked at me for several seconds. Try not to marry 5 more women before I come back. That one did not age well. I did, eventually, formalize several relationships while she was away. To her credit, she handled the contradiction with more humor than anger. Before leaving, she taught me a few principles about political power that became useful later. First, citizen stars open doors but also make you visible. At 1 star, nobody cares what you do. At 7, strangers study your investments, relationships, enemies, and mistakes because any one of them might create opportunity. Second, wealth and political authority overlap but are not identical. A billionaire can buy access. An established political family can survive losing money if its network remains intact. The strongest position comes from understanding both systems, rather than assuming one automatically controls the other. Third, never confuse public politeness with private loyalty. Everyone will smile at you now, she said. That doesn't mean they're with you. I thought of the bank manager, corporate executives, restaurant staff, and people whose attitude transformed the moment my bracelet showed more stars. She was right. The higher I climbed, the more expensive false friendship would become. So how do I know who to trust? Xiao Ru zipped the suitcase. Watch who tells you no. I raised an eyebrow. She explained that flatterers agree when agreement is profitable. Loyal people risk irritating you when they believe you are wrong. That sentence instantly placed Ling Shuang, Miao Shushu, Liu Ruolan, Jiang Cheng, and Xiao Ru herself into a different mental category than people who only praise my money. Even Su Qingyao, for all her materialism, had rejected Zhou Lei when betrayal crossed her line. Maybe loyalty was not purity. Maybe it was the point where someone refused profit because something else mattered more. That idea became one of the standards I used afterward. When Xiao Ru finally left, I stood beside the car longer than necessary. She noticed. You're acting like I'm going to war. You just described federal politics. Same genre, better suits. She laughed, kissed my cheek, and told me to behave. I promised to try. Neither of us believed me. For the first time, I understood why her confidence had never depended on money. She had lived near power long before I learned how to spell billionaire. I did not like her leaving. She knew it. She pinched my cheek and told me that marriage did not mean chaining a person to the house. I told her I preferred the word strategic retention. She told me to stop talking like a corporation. Before leaving, she addressed the household situation directly. As principal wife, she would not interfere with every relationship I formed. She expected honesty, responsibility, and respect. She even joked that if the Jiang family was going to become powerful, I had better stop acting frightened every time another woman entered the picture. I asked whether she was seriously encouraging me. She said she was encouraging me to take responsibility for the chaos I'd already created. Important distinction. Then she left for the capital. The villa felt larger after she was gone. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. For all my jokes about freedom, I had become used to her presence quickly. I realized that power solved many things. It did not solve missing someone. Fortunately, Lu Ruolin did not allow me much time to brood. She called about music, and when Lu Ruolin called about music, casual conversation was apparently illegal. Lu Ruolin wanted me to enter the entertainment industry. I wanted to know why every successful adult I met insisted on assigning me a second career. She said I had a rare combination: appearance, voice, stage presence, and original material. I told her I also had attendance requirements. She did not consider that a serious obstacle. From her perspective, university could coexist perfectly well with a recording schedule, auditions, meetings, rehearsals, publicity, and whatever remained of my sleep. I began to suspect talent managers were powered by unpaid calendar space. Still, I liked music. More importantly, I trusted her instincts. So I agreed to explore the opportunity. A talent program was holding auditions nearby. Lu Ruolin had contacts and initially suggested she could smooth the process. Circumstances changed, people insisted on procedure, and I ended up auditioning properly anyway. That suited me better. If I was going to win, I wanted the room to know why. The judges expected another handsome college kid with a decent voice. What they got was a song from Blue Star that did not exist here. I performed it as my own composition. That ethical question had bothered me at first. Then I remembered that no original artist existed in this universe to receive royalties. Interdimensional copyright law remained regrettably underdeveloped. I sang Ice Rain. The melody carried loneliness without becoming pathetic, and the lyrics had the kind of emotional directness that survives cultural translation. Halfway through, the judges stopped looking at their forms. That was when I knew I had them. When the final note faded, one judge asked who had written the song. I did, I answered. Lu Ruolin, standing nearby, looked proud enough to charge commission on the applause. I passed easily. The audition also taught me something about professional rooms. The first 30 seconds are often more important than the next 30 minutes. Before I sang, several judges barely looked up. They had already heard dozens of hopeful contestants, each one arriving with dreams, nerves, and some friend insisting they were different. I could not blame the judges for being tired. Then the accompaniment began. I deliberately kept the arrangement restrained at first. No dramatic opening. No vocal gymnastics designed to announce technical skill before emotional content. I wanted them to lean forward rather than be hit in the face. By the first chorus, one judge had put down his pen. By the second, another stopped checking the timer. Lu Ruolin stood behind the observation glass with her arms folded, wearing the expression of someone watching a prediction become correct in real time. When I finished, they asked for another song. I had not prepared one. So I played something unfinished from memory and improvised the rest. That was where the system-enhanced guitar skill saved me. My hands found harmonies before conscious thought did. I changed key halfway through, added a small instrumental break, and finished on a softer ending than I had planned. The room went quiet again. One judge laughed. You came here to audition, or to make the rest of our day difficult. I can come back tomorrow if today is inconvenient. That got the first genuine smile from the panel. Afterward, Lu Ruolin grabbed my sleeve in the hallway. Never say that to judges again. They laughed. Because you are handsome and talented. That's not a legal defense. It has worked surprisingly well so far. She looked toward the ceiling as if asking the universe for professional patience. The contract discussions that followed became stranger once the company discovered my Shengxi ownership. A junior executive entered the meeting prepared to negotiate image rights, training obligations, revenue splits, and exclusivity. Then an assistant whispered something in his ear. His posture changed. He checked a tablet. Then he checked me. Mr. Jiang, you're Director Jiang. I told him I was not sitting on the board that day and he should continue as if I were an ordinary artist. He tried. It was impossible. Every unfavorable clause suddenly became negotiable. Every fee developed flexibility. Every sentence began with, "Of course, if you prefer." Lu Ruolin eventually stopped the meeting. This is pointless. She rewrote the key terms herself. Fair creative ownership, reasonable scheduling, no abusive exclusivity, clear management compensation, transparent revenue accounting. I signed because I trusted her more than the people suddenly afraid of my shareholding percentage. That decision strengthened our working relationship. She understood that I could have used power to take everything. Instead, I paid people fairly and expected competence in return. The Tang Yun songwriting session happened a few days later. Tang Yun had once been a major singer, but the market had moved toward younger viral idols and algorithm-driven stars. Her voice remained excellent. Her confidence had not survived as cleanly. When we met, she was polite but skeptical. Why would a 21-year-old student understand the emotional weight needed for her comeback? Reasonable question. I listened to her old recordings first. Then I asked about the years after her peak, not publicly, but how they felt. She said the hardest part was not losing fame. It was hearing younger people imitate a style she helped popularize while executives told her she sounded dated. That gave me the emotional center. I stopped thinking about a comeback song. I thought about a person who had been told the world no longer needed the thing she had spent her life becoming. The melody arrived quickly. Lyrics followed. Lu Ruolin watched me write and kept glancing at the clock. Are you actually composing? No, I'm ordering noodles. She stopped asking. When Tang Yun read the draft, her eyes changed. We worked through revisions together. I adjusted phrases to fit her voice, moved a high note away from a harsh vowel, shortened one instrumental passage, and expanded the final chorus so it felt earned rather than merely louder. That collaboration mattered. My system gave me technique. Tang Yun gave the song lived experience. By the time we demoed it, the piece belonged to the room, rather than just to my memory of another world. Tang Yun finished the first full performance and sat silently for several seconds. Then she asked whether she could keep the handwritten draft. I gave it to her. Lu Ruolin later told me that was the moment Tang Yun truly committed to the comeback. Not because I was a shareholder, because the song made her feel understood. Those were the successes that made entertainment tempting despite everything that later happened with Sun Peinan. The entertainment company handling part of the production turned out to have connections with Shengxi Group. That created one of the more entertaining corporate moments of my new life. Staff members greeted me as a contestant. Then someone recognized my shareholder identity. The smiles changed shape. People straightened. A manager nearly dropped a folder. Nothing reveals an organization's hierarchy faster than discovering the college kid in the waiting room can vote on your parent company's board. I told everyone to relax. That made nobody relax. Lu Ruolin found the whole thing hilarious. She had started by trying to sign a talented student. Now she had accidentally recruited one of the company's owners. Should I call you Boss Jiang? She asked. Only if you want me to call you Employee Liu. She immediately returned to my name. Good decision. Lu Ruolin became increasingly involved in my schedule. She handled calls, introductions, negotiations, and the thousand boring details behind every glamorous public moment. People see singers under lights. They do not see managers arguing over transportation at midnight. I started appreciating her more every week. She was competent without being cold, ambitious without becoming cruel, and far more patient with my chaotic life than any professional should have been. The system displayed her affection rising. I noticed without needing the numbers. One afternoon, after a meeting, we ended up talking alone. I asked what she actually wanted from her career, not the next project, her life. She hesitated. Then, she admitted she wanted to become a gold-level manager, the kind of person capable of building careers rather than merely servicing them. She wanted to prove that her judgment mattered. I told her she had excellent judgment. She smiled. Then I added, you found me, didn't you? She threw a folder at me. Fair response. Our relationship grew from there. Not through one dramatic confession, but through shared work, late calls, arguments about songs, and the strange intimacy of becoming necessary to someone else's plans. Eventually, she qualified as another Red Beauty in more than appearance alone. I accepted the relationship. The system rewarded me. By then, however, the rewards were no longer the main reason I cared. That was becoming a pattern. The system had originally taught me to chase affection because I would die without it. Life was teaching me that affection carried obligations the system never mentioned. Lu Ruolin trusted me. That mattered later. Because success attracts opportunity, it also attracts predators. A director named Sun Peinan had influence in the entertainment industry. He was the type of man who spoke politely in public and treated private power like a license. Lu Ruolin dealt with him professionally at first. Then his intentions became clear. He pressured her. He cornered her. When she resisted, the situation escalated violently enough that she chose a desperate escape rather than submit. She jumped from a third-floor location. The call reached me while I was handling another matter. For several seconds, I could not understand the words. Hospital. Injured. Fall. Director Sunday. Then everything inside me became cold. I reached the hospital as quickly as I could. Lu Ruolin was alive. That was the first fact that mattered. She had injuries, pain, and the shaken expression of someone who had just learned how thin the distance could be between professional harassment and death. I sat beside her. She tried to joke about ruining my schedule. I told her if she apologized one more time, I would fire her and immediately rehire her at double salary, just to prove how stupid the apology was. She laughed, then cried. I held her hand. There are moments when humor is a shield. There are moments when you put the shield down. I did both. She told me what happened. Sun Peinan had tried to use his position to force her. She refused. He became more aggressive. She chose the window because, in that moment, falling seemed safer than staying. My anger was unlike anything I had felt with Zhao Zicheng or Zhu Gang. Those men were arrogant. Sun Peinan had hunted someone who trusted my protection. That touched a different nerve. I wanted to destroy him, not embarrass him, not fire him, destroy him. The system, as if sensing my mood, had already given me a tool whose existence belonged in a horror story. A demon card. I had kept it because I did not know what circumstances could justify summoning something from hell. Now I had an answer. That night, after Lu Ruolin finally slept, I remained on the hospital companion bed. I activated the card. The air changed. A dark figure appeared in front of me. It was smaller than a human, with twisted demonic features, goat-like limbs, a tail, dark armor, and a trident. The thing was ugly enough to make nightmares request better lighting. The system explained its abilities. Shadow concealment. Dark binding. Berserk strength. More disturbingly, I could transfer my awareness into it and control its body remotely. I tested the connection. My human body remained in the hospital. My mind looked through demonic eyes. The sensation reminded me of transmigration itself. That should have been a warning. Instead, I focused on Sun Painan. I found his address. The demon entered the night. The first thing I learned inside the demon was that darkness did not look dark anymore. Edges glowed faintly. Warm bodies stood out. Sound arrived differently too. Footsteps, distant engines, the vibration of a television through walls. The creature sensed the world like a predator built for places humans preferred not to enter. Shadow concealment did not make me invisible in the cinematic sense. It made attention slide away. I could move along walls, under trees, across empty streets, and through blind angles without ordinary people registering anything unusual. Cameras captured distortion at most. That was more frightening than invisibility. Technology could search for an invisible object. It could not easily search for something nobody realized they had seen. Sun Painan lived in a gated villa with security. The demon crossed the perimeter as if the expensive fencing were decorative landscaping. One guard walked within several meters of me. He shivered, glanced around, then continued. I entered through shadow near a service door. Inside, Sun Painan was drinking and making calls. He sounded irritated about Liu Ruolan's escape, not ashamed. I listened long enough to remove any remaining doubt that he saw himself as the victim of inconvenience. He complained that she had overreacted. He worried about scandal. He asked someone to find out how badly she was injured, not because he cared, because he wanted to calculate risk. That was when my anger became very calm. I let the room lights flicker. Sun Painan stopped talking. The line went silent on his phone. He looked toward the hallway. Nothing. Then I let the demon's trident scrape once against the floor from the opposite side of the room. He spun around. Again, nothing visible. His breathing changed. People who manufacture fear often recognize it instantly when it arrives for them. I stepped out of shadow. He dropped the glass. It shattered. The demon looked inhuman enough that explanation was impossible. Horned silhouette, dark armor, eyes reflecting light wrong. A weapon that belonged in mythology rather than suburban architecture. Sun Painan stumbled backward. Who are you? I could not answer normally through the demon, but intent carried through its voice in a distorted growl. I said Liu Ruolan's name. His face changed. That was enough. He tried bargaining almost immediately. Money first, then industry connections. Then he swore he had not actually done anything because she escaped. That argument nearly made me lose control. A person does not become innocent because the victim successfully gets away. I used dark binding. Shadow tightened around his limbs and pinned him in place. He screamed for security. Nobody heard enough to reach him in time. I asked whether he remembered how frightened Liu Ruolan had been. He denied intending serious harm. I increased the pressure. He changed his answer. Power has a remarkable effect on memory. I wanted him to understand helplessness, but I also knew I was standing at the edge of becoming something I would despise in another man. The demon made cruelty easy. That was its real danger. Not the claws. Not the trident. Permission. I stopped myself from turning revenge into entertainment. Sun Painan had created a situation that could have killed Liu Ruolan. He had abused power and would likely do it again. I chose a final outcome that ensured he could not return to her life. The confrontation ended permanently. Then I left. No triumphant speech. No trophy. No satisfaction worth celebrating. By the time security discovered something was wrong, the demon had already dissolved into city shadow. My consciousness withdrew. The hospital ceiling returned above me. For a moment I could still feel the demon's fingers instead of my own. I flexed my hands until the sensation disappeared. Liu Ruolan slept nearby. A monitor beeped steadily. That ordinary sound grounded me. I had protected her. I had also learned how thin the wall was between protecting someone and using their pain to justify whatever I wanted. I promised myself that if I ever summoned that creature again, it would be because there was no safer answer, not because revenge felt satisfying. The next day's news spread quickly through certain circles. Sun Painan's death was bizarre enough to terrify people who knew his reputation. Rumors ranged from professional assassination to supernatural retaliation. Naturally, nobody guessed college student remotely controlling a held demon from a hospital bed. Sometimes, absurdity is excellent camouflage. Yi Wanqing's visit afterward carried more tension than I showed. She came to the upgraded private hospital room where Liu Ruolan had been moved and asked, almost casually, what I thought about Sun Painan's death. I acted delighted. Tragic for him, wonderful for everyone else. Karma works overtime. Yi Wanqing stared, her assistant stared, Liu Ruolan stared. Nobody believed my performance. Fortunately, belief and evidence are different currencies. Yi warned me that the Sun family might retaliate even without proof. Sun Painan was the only male heir of his generation. His grandfather held a federal seat. Their business network had enough influence to make ordinary opponents disappear socially long before anything illegal occurred. I asked whether she was predicting my funeral. She said she was offering an umbrella before the storm. That was the political background behind her marriage proposal. Knowing it did not make the proposal less strange. It made it more honest. Later, when Liu Ruolan and I were alone, she asked me directly whether I had killed Sun Painan. I considered lying. Then I remembered how she had trusted me with the truth of what happened to her. I nodded. She began crying, not because she feared me, because she could not understand why I would risk so much for her. I told her something I had been learning slowly. If I tell someone she's mine to protect, that can't only mean flowers and nice dinners. It has to mean something when the world becomes ugly. She said that sounded possessive. I admitted it probably was. Then I added that she was free to leave me whenever she wanted. Protection without freedom was just another cage. That answer calmed her more than the first one. A few days later, she told me she no longer wanted to continue chasing a career inside the entertainment industry at any cost. She still loved music, she still loved developing talent, but Sun Painin had forced her to see how much ugliness she had normalized as part of the business. I told her she did not need to prove bravery by returning to a place that disgusted her. If she wanted to work, she could work with me on our terms. If she wanted to stop, I could support her. She smiled and said she would remain my manager in the only way that mattered. Someone has to manage you. I told her Xiaoru already claimed that impossible assignment. Liu said one manager was clearly insufficient. Again, annoyingly accurate. She knew I was lying. Neither of us pushed. Instead, I sang softly for her. A song she liked. It calmed her. It also calmed me. In the days that followed, the official investigation around Sun Painin produced questions. Certain details did not make sense to ordinary authorities. That was when Yu Wanqing became important again. She had enough reach inside Shengxi's networks and enough political awareness to understand that something unusual had happened. She did not ask me directly whether I was responsible. She simply helped prevent irrelevant threads from turning into a spectacle. When we met afterward, she studied me for a long moment. You protect your people aggressively, she said. Is that a criticism? An observation? Then observe accurately. Her eyes held mine. I am. The air between us sharpened. Yu Wanqing did not fear me. That was one reason I found her dangerous. Most people reacted to power by becoming flattering or defensive. She reacted by calculating. I respected that more than I should have. Meanwhile, another crisis was approaching Miao Shushu, and this one would hit much closer to home. Miao Shushu called me from the hospital with a voice I barely recognized. Jiang Cheng had collapsed. At first, doctors suspected an ordinary illness. Then tests showed poisoning. Arsenic. By the time I arrived, the little girl was pale, unconscious, and surrounded by machines whose alarms seemed designed to make helpless adults feel even more helpless. Miao Shushu stood beside the bed looking shattered. A critical notice had already been issued. Doctors were doing everything they could, but the poison had entered her system deeply enough that nobody offered certainty. I looked at the child who had once lectured me about being rich enough to skip work. Something inside me refused the possibility that she could disappear because of someone else's cruelty. Then I remembered an item in system storage. A detox potion. I had received it from an earlier reward chest, and thought of it as emergency insurance. The description was absurdly broad. Remove all toxins and restore the poisoned body toward health. This was exactly the emergency I had been saving it for. The problem was using it without turning the hospital into a supernatural investigation convention. I asked for a few minutes with Chen Qian. Miao Shushu trusted me enough not to argue. I gave the potion carefully. Nothing dramatic happened at first. No golden light, no choir. The system apparently understood subtlety better than I expected. Then Qian Qian's breathing steadied. The monitors changed. A nurse noticed. Doctors rushed back in. Blood work was repeated. The poison level began falling far faster than medicine could explain. Her vital signs stabilized. The critical crisis passed. Miao Shushu gripped my arms so tightly that even my enhanced body noticed. She asked what I had done. I told her I'd given Qian Qian something that might help. What? A very expensive supplement. She stared at me. I stared back. We both understood that explanation was nonsense. She chose gratitude over interrogation. That was one of the reasons I cared about her. Qian Qian eventually woke. Weak, confused, but alive. The first thing she asked was whether I had brought food. I laughed so hard the nurse shushed me. Miao Shushu cried into my shoulder. Relief is strange. It can make adults collapse after they have spent hours standing upright through fear. Once Qian Qian was safe, anger arrived. Someone had poisoned a child. That was not an accident I was willing to file under bad luck. Police began investigating. The poisoning investigation was complicated by one ugly fact. Wang Bin had recently returned to Miao Shushu's life pretending to be reformed. He arrived with apologies, soft words, and the careful humility of a man who had finally learned which facial expression opened doors. He said gambling had destroyed him. He said losing his family had changed him. He said he wanted to become Qian Qian's father again. Miao Shushu did not take him back, but she allowed limited contact because Qian Qian was still his daughter. That decision tormented her after the poisoning. She kept asking whether compassion had put her child in danger. I refused to let her carry that blame. Trusting someone to behave like a human being is not the same as committing his crime for him. She knew that logically. Emotion is rarely impressed by logic during a crisis. The police examined food, medicine, access records, communications, and everyone who had been near Qian Qian. Wang Bin cooperated almost too perfectly. He answered questions calmly. His timeline was clean. He denied knowledge of arsenic. He performed concern convincingly enough that one officer privately admitted the case might not hold against him. Miao Shushu became increasingly afraid. If he walked free, he could try again. Against her. Against Jiang Cheng. Against me. That last possibility did not concern me personally. It concerned me because fear had already entered her home once. I wanted it gone. A female investigator allowed me to review part of Wang Bin's recorded statement because of my status and connection to the case. I read every line. His answers were bland, careful, and frustratingly reasonable. He claimed he had spent the relevant period elsewhere. He claimed he knew nothing about the insurance details beyond their existence. He He claimed his recent contact with Meow was motivated by genuine remorse. If I had not known, the system could show relationship history, and if my instincts had not been screaming, I might have believed him. Then I remembered another card in system storage. One of the stranger rewards could temporarily disrupt deliberate deception and force a target into brutally honest expression. I had avoided using it casually because human privacy mattered. A child had nearly died. The threshold for casual had been crossed several counties ago. I arranged to be present during another round of questioning. Wang Bin saw me and immediately became hostile beneath the politeness. He asked why his ex-wife's young boyfriend was allowed near the investigation. I smiled. I'm here for moral support. Technically true. The investigator began. Wang Bin repeated his prepared version. I activated the card. At first, nothing obvious happened. Then she asked why he had returned to Miao Shushu. He opened his mouth to say he missed his family. Instead, the words that came out were, because I needed money. The room froze. Wang Bin froze too. His eyes widened. The investigator asked what money. He tried to stop speaking. His mouth betrayed him. Debt, gambling losses, creditors. He had believed Miao Shushu, successful at the bank, should solve his financial problems because she had once been his wife. When she refused, resentment grew. Then came the worst confession. One creditor had demanded repayment aggressively. Wang Bin had considered offering Miao Shushu herself as part of the bargain. He described it with the casual entitlement of someone discussing collateral. The investigator's expression turned cold. I stopped smiling. In the observation room, Miao Shushu heard everything. Later she told me that sentence hurt almost more than the murder plot. She had married him once, had shared a home, raised a child, and tried to build a life. Somewhere in his mind, all of that had eventually reduced her to an asset he could trade. The questions continued. Why the life insurance policy? Wang Bin admitted discovering it while searching through old documents. 10 million credits, beneficiary, Jiang Cheng. If Miao died and he regained legal guardianship, he imagined controlling the money through their daughter. The plan had grown inside his desperation. Remove Miao, control Jiang Cheng, take the insurance money, return to gambling with the confidence unique to people who believe the next bet will repair every previous one. Then the poisoning entered his confession. His method had been chosen precisely because he believed slow contamination could resemble illness and create uncertainty. He had miscalculated dosage, timing, medical testing, and one very important variable, me. The detox potion destroyed the medical outcome his plan required. The truth card destroyed the legal uncertainty. By the time the effect ended, the room contained more than enough information to reopen every weak point in the case. Wang Bin realized what had happened and started shouting that something was wrong with him. I agreed. We finally found common ground. The officers removed him. Miao Shushu entered afterward. She looked pale, not fragile, emptied. There are truths people need to know and still wish they had never heard. I took her outside before saying anything. She asked one question. Was I really that stupid? No. I married him. People change. People hide things. And sometimes we love the version they showed us. That's not stupidity. That's risk. She stared at the floor. I added. Also, if bad romantic judgment were a crime, half this university would be serving federal sentences. A small laugh escaped her. That was enough for the moment. We returned to Qian Qian's room. The girl was awake and complaining that hospital porridge tasted like hot water with a resume. I agreed. Miao Shushu laughed properly this time. Watching mother and daughter together after nearly losing them both changed my understanding of the Red Beauty system again. The interface could tell me Mao's beauty score. It could tell me affection. It could not tell me that Qian Qian hated carrots, that Mao tucked the blanket twice even when it was already secure, or that fear made her clean things because she needed her hands busy. Those details were the relationship. The number was only a shadow. On the drive home, the mood finally loosened. Miao Shushu, exhausted after days of terror, made a teasing remark about wanting a yogurt drink. The source of the joke was adult enough that I nearly swerved from secondhand embarrassment. I told her that distracting a driver was how public service announcements were born. She laughed until she cried again. This time the tears were healthier. Back at the villa, I decided to paint her. Not because of the system, because I wanted to capture the version of her that had survived. She posed on a sofa while I worked in the collection room. Qian Qian occasionally wandered in, offered completely unqualified artistic criticism, and left with snacks. At one point she announced that her mother looked prettier in real life. I told her all critics should be that honest. Miao Shushu threatened to ground both of us. The portrait became one of my favorites, not because it was technically perfect, because I understood the subject. There was softness, but also endurance. Fear had not made her weak. It had made her tired, and she kept going anyway. That mattered more. The system rewards kept accumulating across my relationships. Affection thresholds produced chests. Chests produced items. Items produced situations that would have sounded insane if I tried explaining them to my old self. One silver chest gave me a beauty potion capable of improving appearance and removing scars, blemishes, and marks. Another reward gave an enlightenment potion that could dramatically increase learning speed. I stored them carefully. Not every magical item needed to be consumed immediately just because it was shiny. That was one lesson video games had taught me correctly. I also learned that my physical and charm attributes, which had once capped at 100, could later be pushed beyond the ordinary human limit after certain system upgrades. The first time the red plus signs reappeared, I almost spent everything instinctively. Then I stopped. 10 points per attribute increase added up fast. For once, I behaved financially responsibly with supernatural currency. Please hold your applause. The villa had become crowded with personalities. Su Qingyao remained proudly materialistic, but noticeably more attentive to me. Ling Shuang was quieter, sharper, and often understood situations before Su did. Miao Shu brought a different energy, mature, maternal, occasionally amused by the younger women's competitiveness. Xiao Ru, even from the capital, remained the principal wife, and therefore the invisible authority everyone remembered whenever arguments grew too theatrical. I was surrounded by women and somehow still spent a ridiculous amount of time discussing logistics. Romance novels had lied to us all. Apparently the true final boss of complicated relationships was scheduling. Liu Ruolin recovered gradually. She hated being forced to rest. I visited often, brought work when doctors allowed it, and deliberately refused to let her turn recovery into another performance review. When she complained about being useless, I reminded her that lying in bed successfully was currently her assigned job. She said I was a terrible boss. I told her she was a terrible patient. Balance restored. Her attack had changed something in me beyond anger. I began taking security more seriously. Money and status could deter ordinary trouble. They could not prevent obsession, corruption, or people willing to break rules. My system powers were becoming more supernatural. That meant my enemies might eventually do the same. Yi Wanqing seemed to understand this before I did. She requested a private meeting. We met at a quiet Shengxi property rather than headquarters. No board members, no assistants. Just tea and uncomfortable honesty. She told me my rise was too fast to remain socially neutral. A young 7-star level figure with major corporate holdings, political connections, unusual skills, and several high-profile relationships would inevitably become a target for alliances and enemies. I asked whether she was warning me. She said she was making an offer. That caught my attention. Yi Wanqing's proposal blended business, family strategy, and personal interests so smoothly that I could not tell where one ended and the next began. She suggested formalizing a relationship between us, not necessarily as principal wife. She knew that position belonged to Xiao Ru. She was willing to accept a secondary legal status if the arrangement made sense. I stared at her. Most people flirted before discussing governance implications. Yi Wanqing had apparently skipped directly to merger negotiations. Do you even like me? I asked. Her expression barely changed. Would I be sitting here if I didn't? That is not an answer. That's a board memo. For the first time, she looked genuinely amused. Then she answered more directly. Yes. She respected my decisiveness, disliked my recklessness, admired my loyalty, and found my refusal to be controlled infuriatingly attractive. That sounded more believable. I told her I could not make the decision alone, not because I needed permission to feel something, because Xiao Ru was my legal principal wife, and I had promised her honesty. Yi Wanqing approved of that answer, which somehow made the whole situation even more serious. I called Xiao Ru. Explaining the conversation to my wife while she was away in the capital was one of the stranger experiences of my life. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked 3 questions. Did I trust Yi Wanqing? Mostly. Did Yi Wanqing understand the household structure? Yes. Was I actually interested, or merely responding to the system? That question made me pause. I was interested. Xiao Ru said then the decision was mine, provided I accepted responsibility for it. She even added that Yi Wanqing's political and corporate ability could be valuable to the family. I accused my wife of evaluating romance like national strategy. She reminded me that I had proposed to her using household management logic. I had no defense. Yi Wanqing eventually became part of my life. The system recognized her as another Red Beauty. Her affection was not the explosive kind Su Qingyao displayed when a sports car appeared. It grew through trust, competence, and repeated evidence that I would not treat her as a decorative trophy. I liked that. She challenged me differently. Where Xiao Ru pushed at my character, Yi Wanqing pushed at my strategy. She asked what I intended to build with all this wealth. That question stayed with me. At first, money had meant escape, then security, then freedom. But billions without direction were just numbers wearing expensive shoes. I wanted more. I wanted influence that could protect people, businesses I could control ethically, political relationships that did not require kneeling, art, music, and projects that could outlive another stock trade. The Red Beauty system had given me a ridiculous path into this world. I did not want my final legacy to be man owned many cars and had an extremely complicated group chat. That would be a terrible biography. Life, of course, did not give me much time for philosophy. Another woman was about to enter the story, and this time, the first thing I saw was someone trying to smash her head against stone. I met Ding Kuikui in the middle of a family disaster that technically had nothing to do with me. That qualification lasted about 30 seconds. She worked for another wealthy Jiang family, not mine, despite the surname, and had been raised in their household since childhood. Their old patriarch had once saved her from drowning, taken in the orphan girl, educated her, and treated her with genuine care. She had repaid the kindness with years of loyalty. The patriarch was now dying. His spoiled descendant, Jiang Yang, wanted access to the old man's will. More specifically, he wanted Ding Kuikui to steal it. She refused. That decision put her in front of him on stone steps while he gripped her hair and treated a human life like an object he had purchased with family history. I arrived in time to hear enough. Jiang Yang shouted that his family had fed her and raised her, so he could do anything he wanted to her. That sentence told me everything I needed to know about him. Some people mistake gratitude for ownership. They do a kindness once, then spend the rest of their lives trying to collect interest from another person's soul. Ding Kukui did not beg. She said the old patriarch had saved her life, and she was willing to repay that debt with her own if necessary, but she would not betray him. Jiang Yang tried to slam her head toward the granite steps. I caught his wrist. The movement stopped so suddenly that his expression lagged behind reality. He turned toward me and demanded to know who I was. I told him I was someone who disliked public murder before dinner. He did not laugh. Ding Kukui looked up. She was frightened, but the fear had not erased her dignity. I respected that immediately. Jiang Yang began explaining his family name, Xinghai Group, his father's status, and all the usual credentials men recite when they realize their personality has failed to impress anyone. I listened. Then I displayed my bracelet. 7 stars. The effect was immediate. Ding Kuikui's eyes widened. Jiang Yang went quiet. The old patriarch who controlled much of Xinghai Group was himself only at the 7-star level. I was barely in my 20s and already stood in the same citizen tier. Suddenly, Jiang Yang's confidence looked like a cheap costume. He tried to recover by becoming louder. That strategy has never worked on me. I tightened my grip until his face changed. I told him Ding Kuikui had already repaid the life debt she believed she owed. She had stayed loyal under pressure, severe enough to kill her. From that moment forward, he had no moral claim over her. Then I looked at her. If you want out, come work for me. She blinked. I offered her a position as housekeeper at my villa. Good salary, protection, no requirement to steal wills. Apparently my employment package was competitive. I added that if she accepted, nobody would be allowed to mistreat her under my roof. Her eyes filled with tears. She asked why I would help someone I barely knew. I told her character was rare, and I had recently become rich enough to collect rare things. That sounded more arrogant out loud than it had in my head. Still, she smiled through the tears. Then she accepted. Jiang Yang exploded again. He called her ungrateful. I reminded him that trying to murder an employee was not a persuasive retention strategy. Corporate management tip number 1. He threatened consequences. I told him to send them by appointment. I had classes. Ding Kuichui eventually returned to the Jiang household to settle remaining obligations, gather belongings, and make sure the dying patriarch's interests were not immediately destroyed by the younger generation. I respected that too. Leaving abuse did not require pretending every person in the old household had been evil. The patriarch had genuinely saved her. Jiang Yang had genuinely corrupted that debt. Both truths could exist at once. Before Xia Tong entered my life, the hospital somehow became our temporary family clubhouse. That sounds ridiculous, considering Liu Ruolan was recovering there and Ding Kuichui had just left another treatment room with stitches on her face. Yet one evening I walked into Liu Ruolan's private room and heard laughter before I even opened the door. I paused outside. For half a second I wondered whether I had entered the wrong floor. Hospitals are supposed to smell like disinfectant, anxiety, and vending machine coffee. This room sounded like somebody had opened a neighborhood recreation center beside an IV stand. When I stepped inside, I discovered the reason. A mahjong table had been set up beside the bed. Su Qingyao, Ling Shuang, Miao, Shu, and Liu Ruolan had somehow created a complete game around a patient who was technically supposed to be resting. Qian sat on the couch nearby, eating apple slices and watching cartoons, occasionally turning around whenever the adults shouted too loudly. I stared at the table, then at Liu Ruolan, then at the nurse call button. Did the doctor prescribe gambling? Liu Ruolan smiled without the slightest guilt. Mental rehabilitation. Su Qingyao nodded seriously. Very advanced medicine. I looked at Miao Shu. She had the decency to laugh. Ling Shuang waved me over. Perfect timing. Take my seat for a minute. Why? Bathroom. She was already standing before I could refuse. Apparently in this household, consent to play mahjong could be transferred like a corporate asset. I sat down. The tiles in front of me looked innocent. The women did not. Su Qingyao leaned back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who had already won several rounds and intended to make sure everyone knew it. Miao Shu arranged her tiles with calm, mature patience. Liu Ruolan watched from beside the bed, competitive enough to forget she was injured whenever a promising hand appeared. I decided to take the game seriously. That lasted approximately 40 seconds. Qianqian wandered over and rested her chin on my arm. Uncle Jiang, are you winning? Absolutely. Su Qingyao immediately exposed my score. I was not winning. Qianqian looked disappointed. Children can be cruel without even trying. You said absolutely. Confidence is part of strategy. Miao Shu nearly dropped a tile laughing. Don't teach my daughter that. I'm teaching leadership. You're teaching bluffing. Same department, different floor. The room relaxed around us. That small moment affected me more than the joke suggested. A few weeks earlier, Miao Shu had been terrified that her daughter might die from poison. Liu Ruolan had thrown herself from a building to escape a man who believed power entitled him to another person's body. Ding Kuikui had nearly had her skull driven into stone for refusing to betray an old man who once saved her. Yet here we were, arguing over tiles and apple slices. Safety is easy to underestimate when you have it. For people who nearly lost it, ordinary laughter can feel expensive. I found myself listening to the room more carefully. Su Qingyao complained that Ling Shuang had been gone too long and was probably checking her makeup. Miao Shu reminded her that she had spent nearly 20 minutes choosing lipstick before coming to a hospital. Su denied this with the confidence of a politician denying a video recording. Liu Ruolan sided with Miao. Qian Qian sided with whoever gave her the next apple slice, a reliable voting bloc. Ling Shuang returned and asked why everyone was laughing. Nobody told her. She looked at me. I told her it was classified. She threatened to reclaim her seat. I refused. Now it was personal. The next round became far more competitive than a hospital recreation activity had any right to be. Miao Shushu played cautiously. Su Qingyao played aggressively. Ling Shuang stood behind me and gave unsolicited advice directly into my ear. I finally told her that if she knew so much, she could sit down and lose her own money. She informed me that technically it had been her seat first. Details. At one point, Su Qingyao tried distracting me with conversation, just as I was calculating my hand. I accused her of psychological warfare. She smiled sweetly. If conversation can beat you, maybe don't challenge the stock market again. That was annoyingly good. Miao Shushu tapped the table. Play. I did. Wrong tile. Su won immediately. The celebration was offensive. Even Qianqian clapped. I demanded a recount. Mahjong does not have recounts. America would have found a way. By 9 that evening, the little girl was fighting sleep so hard that her eyelids had become independent political parties. I called the game. Lu Ruolan needed rest anyway. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang volunteered to remain with her overnight. The offer sounded casual, but I noticed the way Lu's expression softened. Money can buy excellent private care. It cannot replace someone choosing to stay beside you when the lights go out. I took Miao Shushu and Qianqian home. Qianqian fell asleep during the ride. When we reached the villa, I carried her inside carefully, and Miao walked beside me in silence. After I tucked the child into bed, Miao stood in the doorway for a long moment. She trusts you, she said. Kids trust anyone willing to lose at mahjong in front of them. Miao smiled, but her eyes were wet. She told me Qianqian had started asking whether I would be there for breakfast, school events, birthdays, and other ordinary things children use to measure permanence. That frightened me more than billion credit trades. A stock does not remember when you disappoint it. A child does. I told Miao I would never make promises I could not keep, but I would not disappear casually either. She nodded. That answer mattered to her. It mattered to me too. The system rewarded affection numerically. Life kept teaching me that the number was the least interesting part. The following morning, I considered visiting Lu Ruolan again. Then Su sent me a photo of the mahjong table already active. 4 women had apparently organized themselves perfectly, without executive supervision. I stayed home. A wise leader knows when his presence is unnecessary. Also, I wanted to sleep. I made it until 9 before giving up. Once awake, I picked up my phone and opened the short video app. That decision led directly to Sha Tong, Little Pepper, and one of the most expensive internet arguments I would ever participate in. While Ding Kui Kui prepared to change her life, mine moved toward another campus connection, Xia Tong. She was one of Haiqin University's recognized beauties and carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how much attention she attracted. She trained, practiced yoga, and also streamed online. That last detail became relevant one evening when I found her live stream. I expected casual entertainment. Instead, I discovered a digital battlefield where adults spent shocking amounts of money, sending animated GIFs while pretending it was perfectly normal economic behavior. Naturally, I adapted immediately. Sha Tong was in a competitive live stream match against another streamer named Lu Na, nicknamed Little Pepper. The name was accurate. She had the personality of seasoning thrown directly into your eyes. Lu Na's top supporter was a wealthy user known as Big Tiger. He showered her with gifts while her side mocked Xia Tong's viewers for being poor. The comments became increasingly nasty. Xia Tong tried to keep smiling. I could tell she was irritated. I created an account. I had originally opened the live stream app for a completely different reason. The Red Beauty system could evaluate women I saw in person. I was curious whether it could evaluate someone through a phone screen, especially when modern live stream beauty filters could turn a tired commuter into a porcelain elf with suspiciously large eyes. So I browsed. The system scores were merciless. A streamer who looked flawless on screen scored in the 70s. Another had a face filter so aggressive, the curtains behind her bent whenever she turned her head. I began appreciating the system's honesty. The internet, I concluded, was a magical kingdom where walls had smaller waists than people. Then I entered Lu Na's room. Her nickname was Little Pepper. Her visual presentation was loud, polished, and carefully optimized for attention. The system gave her a respectable real-world score, but nowhere near what the filters suggested. Her chat was dominated by one wealthy supporter named Big Tiger. He was the kind of donor streamers publicly called brother, while everyone privately calculated his monthly disposable income. Little Pepper sang, flirted with the camera, and praised him enthusiastically. Then the platform matched her in a PK against Xia Tong. I recognized Xia immediately. Unlike Lu Na, she needed very little digital assistance. Her athletic background, confident posture, and natural appearance survived the system's evaluation easily. She did not know I was watching. The PK started playfully. Then comments turned ugly. Some of Lu Na's viewers mocked Xia Tong for lacking a serious rich supporter. Big Tiger dropped a large gift. Lu Na celebrated loudly and began teasing Xia about being abandoned by her fans. Xia smiled, but I could see irritation behind it. I should have watched quietly. Instead, something petty woke up inside me. I created the rabbit account. My first large gift triggered a full-screen animation. Xia stopped mid-sentence. Wait, who is this? Chat flooded with question marks. I sent another. Then another. The score reversed. Lu Na's smile stiffened. Big Tiger responded. A larger gift. What I did not know at first was how far Big Tiger was willing to go to protect an online identity built almost entirely from spending money. His real name was Li Qing. He was not the untouchable tycoon his username suggested. His total assets were only several million credits, much of that value tied up in property. On the platform, however, he had spent months cultivating the image of a powerful patron. Little Pepper knew exactly how to feed that image. Whenever he gifted, she called him Brother Tiger in the sweetest voice available to modern technology. When the PK turned against her, sweetness became pressure. She asked whether he was really going to let a brand new account embarrass him in front of tens of thousands of viewers. Chat joined in. Some supporters encouraged him sincerely. Others simply wanted entertainment and knew pride was cheaper when somebody else paid for it. The ranking bar became a public auction for one man's ego. Big Tiger disappeared from the room for several minutes. People assumed he had surrendered. He had not. According to what surfaced afterward, he opened his financial services, pledged property, and borrowed against his own home. I learned that detail later and stared at the screen recording in disbelief. A man had turned real estate into cartoon fireworks because a streamer promised affection if he won. I was running a romance system, and even I thought that was excessive. When he returned, the gifts came fast. 10 carnivals, 20, 50, then 100. The PK bar surged back toward Little Pepper. Her live stream erupted. She bounced in her chair, thanked him repeatedly, and promised even more private attention after the match. Her tone made the bargain obvious without saying it directly. Big Tiger typed that he would protect her no matter what. I leaned back and considered stopping. Not because I was short on money, because I had suddenly realized I might be competing against a man who did not understand his own financial limit. Then one of his messages appeared across both rooms. He called me poor, accused me of spending my entire savings, and announced he could play this game all night. My sympathy lasted about 3 seconds. All right, I muttered. Your mortgage, your choices. I increased the gifts. The system did not reward live stream spending directly. This was pure discretionary stupidity. Still, the amount barely touched my finances. That difference made the contest brutally unfair. For Li Qing, each new gift represented debt. For me, it represented irritation translated into pixels. The audience noticed the pace changing. My account did not hesitate. Big Tiger did. Every time he paused, chat demanded another answer. Little Pepper kept encouraging him. She had financial incentive too. Platforms took a share, but large donations still meant serious income for her. The ugliness of the system became clear in real time. Nobody involved needed to be an evil mastermind. The platform wanted engagement. The streamer wanted revenue. The audience wanted spectacle. The donor wanted status and attention. Combine those perfectly ordinary incentives and suddenly a grown man is refinancing his future because an animated ranking bar turned red. American casinos would have looked at the setup and said, maybe add a warning label. I kept sending gifts until the total crossed the point where the match could not realistically be recovered. Little Pepper's smile finally disappeared. Big Tiger stopped responding. The public chat began turning on him almost immediately. Minutes earlier, he had been their invincible patron. Now people asked whether he was broke. Internet loyalty has the shelf life of warm milk. Xia Tong, meanwhile, looked more uncomfortable than triumphant. She thanked me, but she did not gloat at Li Qing. That mattered. It told me she understood the difference between winning a public match and enjoying somebody else's self-destruction. When the PK ended, the platform declared her victory with bright animations and dramatic sound effects. The entire production felt absurdly cheerful considering one side may have just converted home equity into virtual confetti. I messaged Xia privately afterward. Congratulations, she replied almost instantly. Are you insane? A reasonable opening to romance, apparently. I answered with one larger still. He escalated. I escalated. Within minutes, the PK stopped being about streamers and became a duel between two usernames throwing money into digital fireworks. Spectators poured in because online communities have the same instinct as ancient villagers hearing swords clash in the town square. Nobody wants to miss a public disaster. Someone typed, Rabbit Boss is insane. Someone else wrote, Big Tiger, don't lose. A third person sensibly asked whether either of us needed an accountant. I respected that viewer. Big Tiger kept going. His spending crossed numbers that would have impressed me a few weeks earlier. Now I had billions. The system had destroyed my understanding of normal financial restraint. I sent a gift package worth enough to make the room animation run continuously. Xia Tong covered her mouth. Lu Na leaned toward the screen as if proximity might change arithmetic. Big Tiger paused, then sent again. I doubled down. The score gap widened beyond recovery. The PK ended with Xia Tong overwhelmingly ahead. Her room exploded in celebration. Lu Na tried to laugh off the loss, but irritation showed clearly. She claimed some mysterious whale donor did not prove anything about Xia herself. I wrote one message in chat. Then maybe don't make the match about donors next time. That line got screenshot everywhere. Xia read it aloud and laughed. After the stream, she messaged the Rabbit account directly. Who are you? I asked whether she thanked every stranger who spent 10 million credits on her. She replied that strangers did not normally spend 10 million credits. Fair point. We chatted until she noticed a detail in my phrasing that reminded her of someone on campus. I decided to reveal it, rather than play mysterious benefactor for weeks. When she realized Rabbit Boss was me, there was a long pause. Then she sent, Jiang Cheng, 3 question marks. Serious emotional punctuation. I replied with a rabbit emoji. She called immediately. Are you crazy? I've received mixed reviews. You spent over 10 million. Technically, I won. That's not how money works. My recent experience suggests otherwise. She laughed, despite being angry. That conversation lasted longer than expected. Without the public chat watching, Xia Tong admitted the PK comments had gotten under her skin. She hated the implication that a female streamer only mattered if some rich man claimed her digitally. I told her I had not gifted because I wanted ownership. I gifted because the other side annoyed me and I could afford to be immature at industrial scale. That answer was stupid enough to be believable. Then I told her something more serious. I liked her. She thought I was teasing. I explained the entire complicated situation before asking anything from her. Multiple legal partners. Principal wife. No promise of exclusivity. No secret arrangement. If that sounded unacceptable, she should say no, and we would remain acquaintances. She asked whether I always confessed like I was reading contract terms. I own part of a corporation. It's spreading. She laughed again. Then her tone changed. She had seen Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang around campus. She knew rumors about me. She had also watched how openly I defended people connected to me. She asked one final question. If I say yes, are you serious? Yes. Not just because I'm pretty. The system I stopped before revealing too much. Your looks got my attention. Your personality kept it. That was the truth. She accepted. The system rewarded me instantly. I, meanwhile, sat staring at the phone with the strange realization that a relationship begun through a ridiculous live stream war had become emotionally real in less time than some people spent choosing a profile picture. Modern romance was already weird. My system just added premium features. I did not circle around the subject for weeks. Directness had become one of my defining bad habits. I told her the truth about my relationships. Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang were already with me. Xiao Ru was my principal wife. Miao Shu, Lu Ruolan, and Ye Wanxing were part of an increasingly complicated household and emotional network. If Xia Tong wanted a simple, traditional boyfriend, I was the wrong candidate by several zip codes. Then I asked whether she still wanted to be with me. She went quiet. I told her I would ask only once. No pressure, no repeated pursuit, no punishment if she refused. Her answer came faster than expected. Yes. The system chimed immediately. Another Red Beauty acquired. Another relationship package. The rewards arrived with almost comedic predictability. A luxury RV, 100 million credits, and 1,000 system points. I stared at the notifications. Xia Tong had effectively paid for her own 10 million credit livestream victory 10 times over by agreeing to date me. I had accidentally discovered romance arbitrage. Please do not include that phrase in relationship counseling materials. Her affection was already around 80. That surprised me less than it should have. Shared excitement, public support, and an extremely visible display of wealth had done significant work. Xia Tong visited the villa soon afterward. Xia Tong's first morning at the villa deserved its own chapter in domestic diplomacy. She arrived earlier than expected while I was still wearing a robe and had barely finished waking up. The gate camera showed her standing outside with a small bag and the determined expression of someone who had made a decision overnight and intended to test whether reality would cooperate. I opened the gate. She stepped inside, saw me in sleepwear, and forgot her greeting for approximately 2 seconds. I noticed. Good morning. You always answer the door like that? Only for taxpayers and unexpected campus beauties. Her face reddened. Progress. We ate a late breakfast while she looked around the villa. Unlike Su Qingyao, who evaluated luxury as a natural ecosystem, Xia Tong kept asking whether it felt strange living somewhere this large. I told her yes. The first night I moved in, I had walked through rooms simply because I could not believe they belonged to me. That honesty seemed to relax her. She had seen the flashy version of me online, the donor who could throw 10 million credits into a PK without flinching. The man eating toast in a robe was less intimidating. Then the others began appearing. Su Qingyao entered first. She recognized Xia Tong instantly. Campus beauties know one another the way countries know neighboring military strength. There was a brief pause. Then Su smiled, too sweetly. Oh, Senior Xia, Qingyao. That exchange contained no insult. It still felt armed. Ling Shuang arrived next and saved the situation by behaving like an adult. She welcomed Xia, poured tea, and asked whether she had eaten. Miao Shu later joined with Qian Qian and immediately shifted the energy away from competition. Because a child has no respect for romantic tension, Qian Qian asked Xia Tong whether she could do a split. Xia demonstrated. Qian Qian attempted one. Everyone lunged to stop her. Diplomacy achieved through emergency parenting. Once the introduction settled, I explained the household rules again. Xia already understood the legal relationship structure, but hearing it in the house was different. Xiao Ru was principal wife. No one undermined her. No one bullied anyone else. Private rooms stayed private without invitation. Expensive possessions were not communal just because Su Qingyao believed civilization had invented sharing for her benefit. Su threw a cushion at me. Xia laughed. That helped more than any speech. Later, Xia Tong showed us part of her yoga routine. Su joined because she refused to be outperformed publicly. Ling joined because she actually enjoyed dance conditioning. Miao Shu watched for several minutes before Qian Qian dragged her in too. I sat on the sofa with coffee and made the mistake of commenting on form. 4 women looked at me. I stopped coaching immediately. Xia challenged me to participate. My max fitness gave me strength and mobility. But yoga is not impressed by a man's confidence. Several positions were far harder than they looked. Sha corrected my posture with merciless satisfaction. Rabbit boss, money can't buy flexibility, you know. The system probably has a card for that. I stopped myself. Nobody noticed the phrasing. I completed the sequence through raw physical control and stubbornness. Sha looked impressed despite trying not to show it. That day mattered because she stopped being the woman from a live stream and became part of the household rhythm. She helped Sue choose camera angles for photos. She compared training routines with Ling. She played with Jiang Cheng. She listened when Miao Zhushu talked about hospital stress. Compatibility was not guaranteed by beauty scores. The system never promised that. We had to build it manually. By evening, Sha seemed less nervous. She stood beside me on the balcony and admitted she had expected the others to hate her. Some of them might temporarily, I said. She elbowed me. Then I added, but dislike isn't permanent. Respect matters more. Give them reasons to trust you. She asked whether I trusted her. Enough to invite you here. That's a politician's answer. I've been married to Xiaoru too long. She laughed. Her affection did not jump dramatically that night. It rose gradually over the next days. That felt healthier. The first meeting with the others was exactly as comfortable as introducing a new player halfway through a competitive team game. Su Qingyao looked at her. Ling Shuang looked at her. Miao Shushu looked at me. That last look was the most dangerous. I gave everyone the same speech about respect. Sha Tong, to her credit, did not arrive acting as if money entitled her to rank. She knew the structure. She accepted it. That reduced tension quickly. The villa became louder. Sha Tong's energy was different from the others. She enjoyed teasing me openly, enjoyed physical training, and could turn a quiet breakfast into an argument about whether yoga counted as combat preparation. I said no. She demonstrated a stretch that made my joints file a complaint. I amended my position. Her affection eventually reached 90. The resulting bronze chest gave me 3 more unusual cards. The 3 cards from Xia Tong's bronze chest deserved more thought than I gave them at first. Little God of Wealth was essentially a random asset lottery. Use it once, and the system would assign me some form of property or financial asset. The value scaled with my current luck. That immediately made me suspicious of timing. I still had a temporary luck effect from an earlier system reward. If I used the card while luck was high, the outcome might be dramatically better. I saved it. One thing I had learned was that system items were strongest when combined with patience rather than excitement. Divine Doctor was even more valuable. The card could cure one major disease in a target whose physical statistics remained below the superhuman threshold. Cancer, organ failure, severe illness. The description was broad enough to make modern medicine look suddenly incomplete. I stared at the card for a long time. With one use, I could potentially save a life no hospital could save. That made it impossible to spend casually. I remembered Jiang Cheng. The detox potion had sat unused until the exact night it became priceless. Divine Doctor went into the same mental category. Break glass only when ordinary reality fails. The synthesis card created a different temptation. My inventory contained a ridiculous collection of one-use effects gathered from earlier chests. Bad luck, robbery, reverse, copy, dream, kidnap, thief, little God of Wealth, Divine Doctor, and others. Some were powerful. Some were dangerous. Some had names that sounded as if the system had brainstormed them during a sugar rush. The synthesis card would randomly consume 2 and create 1 special card. Randomly. That word hurt. The copy card, for example, was potentially extraordinary. Losing it to a useless combination would be tragic. The Divine Doctor card could save a life. I did not want its sacrifice to create super discount coupon or some nonsense. I considered waiting. Then I remembered the active luck effect. This was exactly the kind of moment luck should influence. Fine, I muttered. Let's gamble. I activated synthesis. The system selected reverse and kidnap. I exhaled in relief. Neither was among the cards I valued most. They fused. Light flashed across the interface. The banquet card appeared. At first, I thought I had lost. A banquet? Then I read the reward structure. Host more than 300 people. Collect emotional value and satisfaction. At conclusion, receive a randomized spending rebate up to 100 times the total cost, a large system point reward, and a treasure chest whose tier depended partly on performance. My mouth slowly opened. This was not an event card. It was a legal wealth multiplier disguised as hospitality. The only real difficulty was assembling 300 guests quickly enough because the card had a same-day activation window once used. I immediately activated it. Then I realized I had created an emergency. I need 300 people for dinner tonight. Xia Tong, still relaxing nearby, lifted her head. What? Don't ask. Call your classmates. Why? Free 5-star dinner. She sat up. How many can I bring? Anyone who can breathe and behave in public. That was the beginning of the banquet operation. I called Su Qingyao and Ling Shuang, told them to invite their classmates. I posted in my own class group. I contacted acquaintances. Once word-free 5-star banquet entered Haiqin University's social ecosystem, recruitment stopped being a problem. Students began recruiting other students on my behalf. One person asked whether a roommate from another department could come. Yes. Someone asked about a girlfriend from finance. Bring her. Someone else asked whether a cousin visiting campus counted. If the cousin could sit in a chair, yes. Within hours, 300 guests stopped sounding ambitious and started sounding like crowd control. That was when I called Minghao Hotel and reserved hall number 1. The manager asked whether I was sure about the quantity of premium dishes I requested. I told him to increase it. The banquet card satisfaction meter had not even appeared yet, and I was already behaving like a casino patron who believed the buffet was part of the strategy. Technically, it was. A little god of wealth card, a divine doctor card, and a synthesis card. The names sounded like items from 3 unrelated games accidentally installed into the same operating system. I studied them carefully. The synthesis card could merge compatible system items. I had several cards sitting unused, including a reverse card and a kidnap card. I combined them. The result was a banquet card. That sounded harmless. It was not. The banquet card required me to host an event with at least 300 guests. The system would evaluate the guests' collective emotional satisfaction. Higher satisfaction meant better rewards. At perfect performance, the event cost could be rebated at an enormous multiplier, along with system points and a random treasure chest. I read the rules twice, then I laughed. The system had finally invented a reason for me to throw the most irresponsibly expensive student party in Hai-Chin history. I started planning immediately. When I told Su Qingyao, she nearly vibrated out of her chair. A massive luxury banquet involving hundreds of classmates was basically her Olympics. When I told Ling Shuang, she asked practical questions about guest count and logistics. When I told Miao Shushu, she asked whether the university administration would hate us. When I told Xia Tong, she asked whether there would be a stage. When I told Xiao Ru by phone, she went silent for 3 seconds and then asked what the system was bribing me with. My wife knew me too well. I denied everything. She laughed in my face. Planning began. And because nothing in my life stayed simple, the banquet would soon become another public collision between money, pride, live stream drama, and people who had badly underestimated me. The banquet card had one simple requirement and one extremely dangerous incentive. At least 300 guests. Make them happy. The happier they became, the greater the system reward. It sounded less like supernatural cultivation and more like I had been possessed by an event planner with gambling problems. I reserved the largest hall at Minghao, a 5-star hotel, with enough marble to make ordinary people lower their voices automatically. The manager initially assumed I was organizing a corporate banquet. Then I explained that most guests would be college students. His smile became professionally confused. I displayed my citizen status. Confusion disappeared. Money remains the world's most successful translation software. I told the hotel not to cut corners. Premium seafood, steak, desserts, fruit, wine for adults who wanted it, non-alcoholic drinks for everyone else, multiple cuisines, proper staffing, live entertainment, and enough food that nobody would leave pretending they had eaten while secretly ordering noodles later. The estimated cost climbed into the tens of millions. The manager kept asking whether I wanted adjustments. I kept saying no. Every time he gave me another chance to save money, the banquet card in my mind practically whispered, "Coward." So I committed. Invitations spread through campus. At first, students assumed the event was exaggerated gossip. Then screenshots of the hotel booking appeared. Then Su Qingyao began enthusiastically telling everyone what to wear. That convinced them faster than official confirmation. More than 300 people registered. I invited friends, classmates, acquaintances, people connected to the music program, and several figures from my growing professional network. The Red Beauties attended too. Su treated the banquet like a red carpet debut. Ling Shuang chose something elegant and understated, which somehow made her stand out more. Miao Shushu looked mature enough that several students immediately began whispering about who she was. Xia Tong arrived ready to turn any camera into free publicity. Lu Rulan, still recovering, attended carefully. Yi Wanqing's presence alone made business-minded guests sit straighter. Xiao Ru was still away in the capital, but she sent a message telling me not to bankrupt myself for entertainment. I sent her a photo of the menu. She replied with 3 dots. Marriage has many languages. On the day of the banquet, I watched the system's emotional meter appear. It tracked collective satisfaction. At first, the value rose slowly as people entered, saw the hall, recognized the food, and realized nobody was about to demand payment. Then it surged. Students who had spent years living on budget meals suddenly found themselves choosing between luxury dishes they had previously only seen in advertisements. The hall became loud with laughter. Phones came out. Photos spread online. The emotional total climbed. What made the banquet work was not simply the price of the food. It was the feeling that, for one evening, nobody had to calculate whether they belonged there. I watched students enter cautiously at first. Some paused at the hall entrance because the chandeliers, formal staff, and polished tables made them feel underdressed even in their best campus clothes. I greeted people personally when I could. Sit anywhere. Eat anything. Nobody is sending you a bill. That sentence relaxed more guests than all the decorations. At one table, first-year students stared at imported crab like it required instructions. A hotel server demonstrated how to open it. At another, 2 guys were reading the label on a bottle of wine and calculating how many months of dorm expenses it represented. One finally put the glass down and said he was afraid to swallow. I told him the worst possible use of expensive food was admiring it until it expired. He drank. Satisfaction rose. The system's emotional meter became addictive to watch. A compliment across the room raised it slightly. A burst of laughter moved it more. When a table discovered the dessert station, the number jumped. I began to understand why casinos avoid showing players the exact psychology of every person around them. Feedback creates obsession. I nearly turned hospitality into optimization. Then Meow Shoo Shoo noticed me staring into empty space. What are you calculating? Whether everyone is having fun. You could ask them. Right, human solution. I walked around instead. That changed the night for me. Classmates I barely knew told me about internships, relationships, families, and dreams. A student from another department thanked me because he had never entered a five-star hotel before and had always assumed staff would look down on him. They did not, at least not tonight. Another guy asked whether wealth felt different from what people imagined. I almost laughed. Mostly, it means the expensive problems arrive wearing better clothes. He thought I was joking. Partly. A group of girls asked for photos with Su Qingyao and Sha Tong because both were famous around campus for different reasons. Su loved every second. Sha pretended to complain and then corrected the lighting herself. Ling Shuang ended up helping a nervous freshman fix a broken dress strap with surprising practicality. Miao Xiu kept checking whether Jiang Cheng was eating too many sweets. Jiang Cheng kept relocating to different tables to evade inspection. I caught her carrying 2 desserts and asked how many she had eaten. This is the second. Truth, she thought for a moment. Second at this table. Future lawyer. Lu Ruolin stayed seated more than usual because of her recovery. But students recognized her as an entertainment professional and began asking career questions. She answered patiently until I rescued her by telling everyone consultation fees started at 1 expensive dessert per question. Within minutes, a pile of desserts appeared near her. She blamed me. I claimed market demand had spoken. Yi Wanqing arrived later than the students. Her appearance changed the atmosphere at the nearest tables because some guests recognized Shengxi Group's powerful executive immediately. She did not act like a corporate celebrity. She sat with the others, accepted food, and quietly observed the chaos. At one point she leaned toward me. Your events are unusual. Good unusual? Profitable? I almost choked. She had no idea about the banquet card, but her instincts were offensive. Emotionally profitable. That's not an accounting category. Yet, she shook her head. The system meter kept climbing. I realized the highest increases came not from luxury itself, but from shared moments people would remember. That inspired the Big Eater contest. A 1,000,000 credit prize was ridiculous enough to become instant legend. Students crowded around the competitors. Wu Gang approached the challenge with monk-like seriousness. He removed his jacket, stretched his shoulders, and asked whether vomiting meant disqualification. I told him yes. He nodded as if receiving Olympic rules. His main rival was another sports student nicknamed Little Black. The contest began with seafood, then meat, then increasingly unreasonable combinations as spectators shouted suggestions. I had to stop people from weaponizing the kitchen. No custom dishes designed to kill contestants. This is a banquet, not a Roman arena. Wu Gang kept eating. Little Black kept pace until white truffles finally defeated him. He pushed away from the table, covered his mouth, and surrendered before disaster reached the carpet. Wu Gang raised both arms. The room roared. I transferred 1,000,000 credits immediately. His phone confirmed receipt. The guy genuinely had tears in his eyes. Brother Jiang, eating changed my life. Please don't turn that into a career plan. Too late. Other students were already discussing training for next time. I had accidentally created an obesity incentive program. The satisfaction meter surged past every previous level. By the time Lu Na interrupted the banquet later, the room already felt united enough that her insults landed on everyone, not only me. That was why the crowd's reaction became so intense. They were not defending a distant rich host. They were defending their night. That distinction turned public humiliation into collective entertainment. I am not proud of how much the system rewarded everyone's enjoyment of Lu Na being corrected. I am also not pretending I disliked it. I should have been satisfied. Instead, I looked at the meter and thought, we can do better. This is how systems create villains. I needed something memorable. Food alone made people happy. Competition made them insane. So I announced a Big Eater contest. 1,000,000 credits for first place. The room exploded. People who had been politely sampling steaks suddenly began evaluating stomach capacity like professional athletes. A student named Wu Gang rose to the challenge with the solemn expression of a man who had trained his entire life for this exact moment without knowing it. The contest began. Plates disappeared. Friends shouted encouragement. Someone started taking bets until I told them to stop turning my banquet into an underground casino. Wu Gang kept eating. I became concerned for him. He told me not to interfere with destiny. That sentence deserves to be carved on a monument to college decision-making. He won. When I transferred the 1,000,000 credit prize, the hall erupted again. The satisfaction meter jumped beautifully. Wu Gang held his stomach with one hand and his payment confirmation with the other. He looked like capitalism had personally defeated him but paid severance. I thought the evening had peaked. Then Luna arrived. Little Pepper from the live stream. Of course she did. Apparently the universe believed every successful event required an antagonist who had missed several important updates. She arrived with her fiancé, Tang Hai. A businessman with enough money to be confident and not enough information to be cautious. They had planned an engagement banquet and wanted hall number 1. My hall. Hotel staff explained that it was already reserved. Lu Na did not accept this gracefully. She complained about students occupying a luxury venue. She implied that people like us could not afford it. Then she recognized Sha Tong. The temperature dropped immediately. Their live stream rivalry had not ended emotionally, just because the PK had ended financially. Lu Na mocked Sha Tong for depending on a mysterious rich supporter. Sha Tong smiled. That smile should have warned her. I stood nearby and waited. Lu Na bragged about wealthy connections and questioned whether Rabbit Boss even existed as the person Xia claimed. Xia Tong turned toward me. Should I tell her? I shrugged. Her grin widened. Then she introduced me. The famous Rabbit Boss. The account that had dropped more than 10 million credits to crush their livestream match. Lu Na stared at me. Tang Hai stared too. That alone would have been satisfying. Unfortunately, pride rarely knows when to stop spending itself. Tang Hai stepped forward and displayed his 5-star citizen status. He expected the room to react. Under ordinary circumstances, it would have. 5 stars represented serious wealth and social power. I had once celebrated reaching that tier. Then Su Qingyao walked over. Su enjoys luxury. Su enjoys showing off. Su especially enjoys showing off when someone else begins first. This situation was basically a national holiday for her personality. Lu Na made another insulting remark. Su slapped her. The sound cut through the surrounding conversation. Then Su lifted my wrist and displayed my status. 7 stars. Silence. Tang Hai's face changed. Lu Na stopped speaking. Students nearby tried desperately not to look delighted. Su looked at them with the satisfaction of a woman who had just been handed the world's largest microphone. You called him a poor student? Her tone was sweet. That made it worse. Tang Hai's company, assets, and family background suddenly became irrelevant next to a 7-star citizen whose wealth and holdings placed him on another social floor entirely. He attempted to de-escalate. I let him. There was no need to humiliate him further once he understood the mistake. Lu Na, however, still looked furious. Xia Tong leaned over and quietly reminded her that perhaps insulting people's guests at their own banquet was not a growth strategy. That line nearly made me applaud. Tang Hai took Lu Na and left. The whole confrontation lasted only minutes. The emotional meter loved it. Apparently, collective schadenfreude accounted as satisfaction. The system has no moral philosophy degree. Students immediately began retelling the scene, with increasingly inaccurate details. Within 20 minutes, rumor claimed I had bought the hotel, Tang Hai had knelt, and Su Qingyao had slapped 3 people instead of 1. None of that happened. I gave up correcting anyone. The banquet continued. People ate, laughed, competed, took photos, sang, and treated the event as the kind of ridiculous college memory they would mention 10 years later whenever someone asked whether university had been fun. That mattered to me more than I expected. I had spent so much of this life measuring value through the system. Affection points, citizen stars, bank balances, skill levels. Watching hundreds of people simply enjoy themselves reminded me that numbers could describe outcomes without replacing them. Near the end, the banquet card reached maximum satisfaction. 3,000 emotional points, 100%. Perfect evaluation. I felt like a student who had somehow received full marks for throwing a party. The final hotel bill came to roughly 51.28 million credits. Management offered discounts because of my status and business connections. I refused. The manager thought I was generous. The system knew I was shameless. The banquet card multiplied the qualifying expenditure by 100. The rebate appeared in my account. More than 5 billion credits. I stared at the number. I had spent 51 million and somehow made billions by feeding college students lobster. Economics had officially left the building. The system also awarded 10,000 points and a gold chest. That chest was what I cared about most. Gold tier rewards had already proven capable of changing the rules of my body and life. I waited until I was away from the crowd before opening it. The result made me question whether the system had been designed by an immortal teenager. A golden artifact, specifically, golden kidneys. I read the name twice. Then I looked around the empty room, as if another person might appear and explain that this was a prank. Nobody did. The item fused automatically. Warm energy spread through my body. The description was both absurd and terrifyingly effective. It enhanced stamina, recovery, vitality, and certain intimate capabilities while also allowing affectionate interactions to contribute to growth. I covered my face. System, were there no swords available? No answer. Of course not. The Red Beauty system had apparently chosen its branding and intended to die on that hill. While I was discovering that the system's idea of a legendary artifact had apparently been named by a comedian, Haichin University was discovering something else. Me. The banquet did not stay inside the hotel. Of course it didn't. 300 college students had phones, social accounts, group chats, and absolutely no professional obligation to keep a spectacular story private. Before midnight, videos from Hall Number 1 were everywhere on the campus network. One clip showed the food spread. Another showed Wu Gang receiving his million-credit prize and staring at his bank notification like a man who had just eaten his way into a new tax bracket. The most popular video, naturally, showed Su Qingyao confronting Liu Na, and the room discovering that the quiet student hosting dinner was a 7-star citizen. People edited dramatic music under it. Someone added lightning effects behind my bracelet. Another person slowed Tang Hai's facial reaction to 10% speed and captioned it when the side quest accidentally summons the final boss. I laughed harder than I should have. By morning, the story had escaped the campus network entirely. Short video platforms picked it up. Microblog accounts reposted the bill. A headline claimed a university student had spent more than 50 million credits feeding classmates at a 5-star hotel. Technically true. Emotionally misleading. It made me sound like I had woken up and decided tuition was insufficiently expensive. Another post called me the 7-star Fresh Prince of Haichin. I had questions. Nobody answered them. Su Qingyao loved the attention. Naturally. She scrolled through comments with the delighted focus of someone reviewing fan mail written to a kingdom she had personally conquered. Ling Shuang was less obvious but saved several videos. I caught her doing it. She claimed she was preserving evidence. Evidence of what? That you once voluntarily paid full price for something. Fair attack. Xia Tong's live stream audience exploded as people connected Rabbit Boss, the banquet host, and me into one identity. Her followers demanded a reaction. She gave them a smile and said only that I was exactly as ridiculous offline as online. That answer created more speculation, not less. Miao Shushu worried about privacy. Yi Wanqing worried about business exposure. Lu Ruolin, still recovering, worried that reporters might discover our music plans before we were ready. I listened to all three. For the first time, fame stopped feeling like a free side effect of money and started looking like another resource that needed management. Attention creates leverage. It also creates targets. I asked Yi Wanqing's people to monitor serious threats without suppressing harmless gossip. College students joking about my dinner did not need corporate lawyers appearing at their dorm doors like federal agents over a meme. That would be insane. And terrible public relations. The banquet also changed how classmates treated me. Some became more respectful, some became awkward. A few suddenly remembered that we had supposedly been close since the first week of school, despite previously knowing my name only when attendance was called. Money has a fascinating effect on human memory. I did not become cynical about everyone. Many students had simply enjoyed a ridiculous night and wanted to thank me. Several messaged that the meal was the first time they had ever entered a five-star hotel. One said his parents ran a tiny restaurant and he had spent half the evening photographing dishes to show them. That message stayed with me. I had thought I was farming a banquet card. For somebody else, I had created a memory he wanted to take home to his family. The system gave me numbers. People kept giving the numbers meaning. That difference was becoming impossible to ignore. The effects became obvious quickly. My energy felt almost limitless. Recovery improved. The relationships around me deepened over the following period, and several affection scores climbed toward their maximum thresholds. I had learned not to treat those increases as mere game mechanics. Still, when treasure chests began appearing, I was not too spiritually mature to celebrate. Su Qingyao reached 100 affection. Ling Shuang reached 100. 2 gold chests. Miao Shushu and Xia Tong reached 95. 2 silver chests. The system notifications stacked so rapidly that for a moment I felt as if I had completed several quests by surviving my own household. I opened the rewards carefully. The gold tier set continued its bizarre theme. The paired golden artifact from the first gold chest was stranger than my summary initially made it sound. It automatically bound to every recognized red beauty and synchronized with the golden kidneys. The system described the effect in language so shameless that I briefly considered filing a complaint with whoever designed immortal item names. Beneath the crude branding, however, the mechanics were serious. The first effect created a permanent fidelity lock tied to the relationship system. In practical terms, betrayal at the deepest romantic level became impossible while the bond remained valid. I did not know how I felt about that. Trust enforced by magic is not the same as trust chosen freely. So I decided never to use the artifact's existence as an excuse to stop respecting anyone's autonomy. The second effect allowed the women's own physical attributes to improve gradually through the bond. That interested me more. My life was becoming dangerous. Sun Peinan, Wang Bin, Jiang Yang, corporate enemies, none of those situations had been theoretical. The women around me needed more than bodyguards. They needed the ability to protect themselves when no one arrived in time. The third effect was the most useful of all. Skill sharing. I could share certain learned skills with bonded red beauties. The system presented it almost casually. I did not react casually. If the women could receive my driving ability, they would be far safer in high-performance vehicles. If they could receive ancient Tai Chi, they would gain serious self-defense skills. If artistic or musical abilities could be shared, careers and hobbies could change overnight. This was not merely a relationship artifact, it was a household upgrade network I chose carefully. First, driving. Several women regularly used supercars. Allowing someone with ordinary skill to drive a vehicle capable of absurd speed was basically giving a missile a driver's license and hoping for emotional maturity. I shared advanced driving competence. The results were immediate. Su Qingyao, who previously drove the Porsche with more confidence than technique, suddenly understood braking zones, vehicle balance, traction, hazard anticipation, and emergency control. She took the car around the property once and returned looking stunned. Was driving always this complicated? Yes, you were just surviving through optimism. Ling Shuang laughed. Then I shared ancient Tai Chi. That reaction was even more dramatic. Miao Shushu stood in the living room slowly testing balance shifts as knowledge integrated. Xia Tong adapted fastest because of her athletic background. Ling Shuang, with dance training, understood body control naturally. Su Qingyao tried one movement, nearly hit a decorative vase, and announced that martial arts were dangerous to furniture. I moved the vase. Even Lu Ruolan, while injured, could study the principles mentally and use them during rehabilitation later. Yi Wanqing appreciated the self-defense value immediately. Xiaoru's reaction from the capital was the funniest. I shared the skill remotely through the bond. Minutes later, she called. Explain. Good morning to you too. Why do I suddenly understand a martial art I never studied? Marriage benefits package. Silence. Then she told me we would discuss my increasingly suspicious abilities when she returned. I told her I looked forward to the performance review. The golden right hand arrived from the second gold chest. Its Titan Force skill worried me immediately. A temporary 100-fold multiplier applied to my right arm could turn an already superhuman strike into something closer to heavy machinery. I tested it far from people using a reinforced practice target. The target did not survive. Neither did part of the mounting structure. I stood in the wreckage and decided Titan Force was an emergency ability, not a party trick. The affinity touch function sounded almost comedic, but raised another ethical problem. Physical contact could slightly increase a woman's affection. I refused to use that deliberately on strangers. Manipulating someone into liking me through repeated touch would be creepy, even if the system labeled it a feature. I had enough natural advantages already. The thought-sensing function required even stricter rules. One touch could reveal a target's current internal thoughts. For enemies, that was intelligence gold. For loved ones, it could become poison. Healthy relationships require room for private irritation, unfinished feelings, stupid thoughts, and temporary emotions that people choose not to turn into actions. If I read every unfiltered thought, I would eventually punish someone for a feeling they had never intended to express. So I adopted a rule: no mind reading without consent unless there was an immediate safety threat or serious deception affecting others. The system never ordered that rule. I did. Power was becoming a test of personality more than ability. The silver chest rewards looked modest only in comparison. The blank property deed could legally grant me any local qualifying mansion. The emotion collection bottle could gather envy, shock, admiration, jealousy, and other strong emotional reactions for 12 hours, then convert the total into randomized rewards. I stared at that bottle and thought about Su Qingyao. If anyone could generate industrial quantities of envy by walking through a public place, it was her. I saved it. No reason to waste a perfectly good social weapon without a plan. Other unused cards remained in storage too. Little God of Wealth could randomly grant property, with value influenced by luck. Divine Doctor could cure a major disease in a target whose physical state remained within ordinary human limits. Those cards were miracles in disposable format. I treated them accordingly. There is a temptation in stories to use every powerful item as soon as it appears. Realistically, the smartest thing you can do with a miracle is sometimes put it somewhere safe until the day ordinary solutions fail. Qianqian's poisoning had already proved that. If I had wasted the detox potion for convenience, she might have died. That memory cured me of careless inventory management permanently. Another important upgrade came through a gene potion. When I first obtained it, the description claimed it could break the ordinary human attribute ceiling. My fitness had already reached 100. I had assumed that meant perfection. The potion disagreed. I drank it. The process felt as if every cell in my body had received an emergency renovation order at the same time. Heat spread through my bones. Muscles tightened. My heartbeat became thunderous. For several minutes, I seriously considered whether gene improvement was system language for congratulations, enjoy spontaneous combustion. Then the pain faded. The red plus signs returned beside my attributes. 100 was no longer the ceiling. It was the old ceiling. I could continue increasing fitness and charm beyond normal human standards. I tested a few points cautiously. The cost remained 10 system points per increase. Expensive. But the effect was undeniable. My senses sharpened. Strength improved. Reflexes became almost predictive. At high enough levels, ordinary athletic comparisons stopped making sense. I could sprint faster than elite runners, lift ridiculous weight, and recover from exertion with frightening speed. The improvement carried responsibility. A careless push could injure someone. A playful strike could become serious. Ancient Tai Chi became even more valuable because it gave me control rather than just force. I trained privately. Balance drills, footwork, breathing, redirecting force without breaking objects. The villa became my secret gym whenever nobody was watching. Unfortunately, nobody was watching became difficult in a house increasingly populated by curious women. One morning, Xia Tong caught me lifting a heavy marble table with one hand. She stood in the doorway for 3 seconds. Then she asked whether I had been pretending to struggle during her workouts just to make her feel better. I told her the table had insulted my family. She threw a yoga block at me. Miao Shushu later discovered I could jump high enough to reach a second-floor balcony without stairs. She demanded an explanation. I told her regular exercise was important. She gave me the exact expression mothers reserve for children who have told an especially lazy lie. Secrets were becoming harder to maintain. I could not tell them everything about transmigration or the system yet, but I gradually admitted that my body had changed through unusual means and that I possessed abilities beyond normal people. The women reacted differently. Su Qingyao asked whether that meant I could become even richer. Classic Su. Ling Shuang asked whether the changes were dangerous. Miao Shushu asked whether there were side effects. Xia Tong immediately wanted to challenge me to physical tests. Lu Ruolin wondered whether enhanced stamina meant I could handle more performance schedules. I told her absolutely not. Yi Wanqing asked what strategic risks the ability created if discovered. And Xiao Ru, when I told her by call, simply laughed. She had already suspected I was not normal. You changed too quickly, she said. Normal people don't become rich, master painting, improve their body, learn martial arts, and write hit songs in a few weeks. Maybe I'm talented. Maybe you're shameless. Marriage remained romantic. Her political work in the capital also deepened. She eventually told me more about the structure of the Great Chia Federation. The highest authority did not resemble the presidential systems I knew from Blue Star. Power moved through federal institutions, citizen ranks, elite families, corporate blocs, and parliamentary figures whose influence could reshape entire regions. Xiao Ru was a candidate for an important federal legislative position. That explained the travel, security knowledge, martial ability, and occasional way powerful people spoke to her with more respect than a normal art instructor would receive. I joked that I had accidentally married into politics. She corrected me. Politics married into you. That was somehow worse. Her absence also forced me to become more responsible at home. I had once imagined wealth meant never doing chores. Technically, the villa had services available. Emotionally, however, living with several adults meant constant micro-negotiations about space, privacy, meals, vehicles, schedules, and who had taken whose cosmetics. One argument nearly started because Su Qingyao borrowed something from Ling Shuang without asking. I intervened like a peacekeeper deployed to the world's most attractive border dispute. Return it. Apologize. Buy your own. Su pouted. Ling accepted. Crisis ended. Then Jiang Cheng drew on one of my expensive art papers with crayons. I framed it. Miao Shushu cried when she saw it. Not every valuable thing needed to be beautiful by professional standards. Jiang Chen's drawing looked like 3 explosions fighting a duck. It was priceless. The household slowly stopped feeling like a collection of system targets and started feeling like a family designed by a committee with no sense of simplicity. That shift scared me more than any enemy. Money could be replaced, cars could be replaced, people could not. I became more protective as that truth settled in. After Sun Peinan, I increased security arrangements around Liu Rulan. After Wang Bin, I made sure Miao Shou and Qian Qian had reliable protection and emergency contacts. After corporate conflicts, I asked Yuan Qing to help audit weak points around the villa and our daily travel. She produced a document thick enough to qualify as a weapon. I read it anyway. One recommendation concerned staff. The villa needed a trustworthy full-time housekeeper who could coordinate domestic matters without becoming part of campus gossip or corporate politics. That made Ding Quichue's future arrival even more timely. Before she came, however, several system rewards pushed my finances and status even further. My daily point income grew with every Red Beauty's affection. At low levels, the points had felt scarce. Now the household generated a steady stream. I could improve skills with less hesitation. Driving reached a level where normal traffic felt slow. Painting climbed to true master territory. Guitar and singing improved enough that professional musicians stopped treating me as a talented amateur. Composition became one of my strongest creative skills. Ancient Tai Chi developed through practice and system enhancement. I was becoming annoyingly competent at too many things. There is a fantasy that being good at everything makes life easy. In practice, it mostly makes people ask you to do more things. Liu Rulan sent more music work. Xiao Ru asked for political event design advice because she trusted my visual sense. Yuan Qing involved me in corporate decisions. Xia Tong wanted me to appear in a stream. Su wanted a different sports car color. I said no to at least 2 of those requests. Personal growth. One evening, I tested the golden right hand's thought-sensing ability under controlled conditions with Su Qingyao. I warned her first. She thought it sounded fun. I touched her hand. Her internal voice flooded into my mind. The first thought was about me. The second was about a handbag she wanted. The third was also about me, though not suitable for a family-friendly summary. I released her hand immediately. She laughed at my expression. What did you hear? Capitalism. What? Nothing. I never tested it casually again. Privacy deserved protection, even when technology or magic made violation easy. The titangent strength function of the hand was another matter. I tested it on reinforced equipment in a controlled location. For a brief burst, the force available through my right arm multiplied 100 times. The result destroyed the test object more completely than expected. I stood looking at the wreckage. That ability was not for showing off. It was a weapon. I stored that fact carefully beside the demon card memory. The stronger I became, the more I understood that power needed categories. Some abilities were for daily life. Some were for emergencies. Some should only exist in the darkest drawer until absolutely necessary. Then there was the blank property deed. That one was definitely for showing off. I began researching the most valuable residential property in Haikin. Jinyuan Shuishu Villa No. 1 had already seemed unbelievable when I arrived in this world. Now I wanted something large enough for the household, guests, security, art, music, vehicles, and the kind of future my life seemed determined to build. The answer was Emerald Bay. Specifically, Estate No. 1. Locals called it the Heavenly Palace. That nickname sounded ridiculous. Then I saw the property. I stopped laughing. By then, Yuan Qing and I had already formalized our secondary marriage with Xiao Ru's approval, so the legal structure of the household was no longer theoretical. It was paperwork, responsibility, and a growing list of people whose futures were tied to mine. Then I had a dangerous thought. If we were formalizing everything, why stop there? I created a private group chat with Su Qingyao, Ling Shuang, Miao Shushu, and Liu Rulan. My message was brutally simple. Anyone who wants legal status, fill out the forms. The chat went silent, then exploded. Su Qingyao reacted as if someone had fired a starter pistol. Ling Shuang sent her form with terrifying efficiency. Miao Shushu asked whether I'd hit my head. Liu Rulan laughed and told everyone to hurry before I regained common sense. Within minutes, forms arrived. I forwarded them through the federal marriage portal. Xiao Ru received the approval requests one by one. She signed them. Then she sent me a private message. 5 in one day? You're impressive. I could hear the sarcasm through text. I replied that efficiency was a virtue. She told me to conserve my health. I reminded her my fitness was superhuman. She replied that confidence had killed many men throughout history. I stopped arguing. The official notifications arrived. Names connected to mine through legal status. The emotional effect surprised me. For the system, it changed almost nothing. They were already Red Beauties. For the women, it changed everything. Su Qingyao spent half the day staring at her bracelet confirmation and calling me husband with renewed enthusiasm. Ling Shuang said less, but her quiet smile stayed for hours. Miao Shu looked relieved in a way I had not anticipated. For a divorced mother, legal recognition meant she no longer had to wonder whether she was merely temporary entertainment for a younger rich man. Lu Ruolan joked about becoming officially trapped with her most troublesome client. Then she cried when she thought nobody was looking. I pretended not to. Sometimes dignity is a gift you give by looking away. Jiang Cheng remained the most complicated case. Her affection was only moderate at first. The system made that obvious. She had married me partly from strategy, partly attraction, partly family pressure and calculation. I could have treated that as a weakness. Instead, I found it honest. Love does not always arrive before commitment. Sometimes trust has to grow afterward. I decided not to force it. The system would reward higher affection eventually. I cared more about whether she could look at me months later and know the decision had not been a mistake. That slower progression eventually mattered. Around this time, I also learned more about the hospital room opposite Lu Ruolan's. 4 elite bodyguards constantly guarded its door. They watched me whenever I passed. At first, I assumed my good looks had created an extremely specific security problem. Then I realized they were evaluating me professionally. Whoever occupied that room was important. I upgraded ancient Tai Chi further as a precaution. The system charged double points for special skills. Painful, but worth it. My daily affection income now exceeded 500 points. With multiple Red Beauties, the system's economy had changed completely. What once took days of careful saving could now be funded steadily by the relationships themselves. That loop was powerful. It was also dangerous. The stronger I became, the easier it would be to justify adding women simply for resources. I did not want to become a collector, wearing human faces as inventory labels. So I kept returning to one question. Would I still want this person in my life if the system gave me nothing? If the answer was no, I stepped away. That rule had already saved me from Shu Lele. It would save me from other temptations later. The system's beauty potion could have removed the scar instantly, but I did not use supernatural medicine on her without consent. Instead, I kept the option available. Power does not erase permission. That principle became increasingly important as my abilities expanded. By the time Ding Quiqui was ready to move in, our household was legally formalized, financially absurd, and organizationally desperate for someone competent. In other words, she was arriving at exactly the right time. I just had not yet explained that to Su Qingyao. That conversation would be entertaining. It became even more entertaining once I finally used the blank property deed. I selected Emerald Bay Estate number 1. The system asked for confirmation. I pressed yes. That was it. No lawyer's office, no negotiation, no month of inspections, signatures, bank approvals, or a realtor explaining why cozy means the bedroom fits exactly one shoe. The ownership data updated legally under my identity. A property worth an absurd fortune simply became mine. I checked the records 3 times anyway. Trauma from normal economics dies slowly. The estate covered more than 200,000 square meters. Calling it a villa felt like calling an aircraft carrier a boat. A private road approached, landscaped gates. Beyond them, sat gardens, water features, guest buildings, staff residences, security facilities, entertainment areas, garages large enough to make my current collection look modest, and a main residence designed on a scale that assumed ordinary architecture had personally offended the owner. There was a private beach, a marina, a track suitable for driving high-performance cars without threatening commuters. Multiple terraces overlooked the water. Indoor and outdoor pools seemed to compete for attention. The main house contained rooms I could probably lose guests inside for several days. I walked through it alone the first time. My footsteps echoed across polished floors. The silence felt different from Jinyuan Shushu. That villa had shocked me because I had gone from debt to luxury overnight. Emerald Bay shocked me because it represented scale. This was not a reward meant for one young man. It was infrastructure for a household, staff, guests, work, art, business meetings, security, and whatever ridiculous future my life was building toward. I stood on a terrace facing the sea and remembered the cramped dorm room where I had awakened. Less than long ago, I had been one breakup away from literal system execution. Now, I owned a private shoreline. The contrast was so extreme that laughter came out before I could stop it. If Blue Star Me had seen this, he would have assumed I was lying. If the original Jiang Cheng had seen it, he might have cried. I felt both reactions somewhere inside me. I did not immediately tell the women. That would ruin the surprise. Instead, I returned to Jinyuan Shuixiu and announced only that we would be moving soon. Su Qingyao stopped eating. Moving? Why? What's wrong with this villa? Nothing. Then why move? Because I found something bigger. Her eyes changed instantly. I recognized that look. The materialism radar had detected weather. Ling Shuang asked where. I refused to say. Xia Tong demanded a clue. I said there was water nearby. She guessed everything from a lakeside apartment to a yacht. Miao Shushu asked whether Jiang Cheng would need to change schools eventually. That was the first practical question. Lu Ruolan, still using a wheelchair or support while healing, asked whether the new house had a quiet room suitable for music work. Yi Wanqing asked whether the property had sufficient security separation for public and private areas. Su Qingyao stared at everyone. Am I the only person who just wants to know how expensive it is? Nobody answered. She pointed at us accusingly. Liars. Fair. Before move planning could begin, Yi Wanqing called with news about her grandfather's birthday. The family gathering where I was supposed to accompany her and formally appear had been cancelled or postponed because the old man remained in the capital. She sounded annoyed but also slightly relieved. Meeting an influential elder as the newly registered secondary husband or whatever terminology best described my side of the arrangement would have been socially complicated. I told her we could face it later. She said later would probably be worse because my reputation kept expanding every week. Also fair. The morning Ding Quique arrived. The villa was unusually peaceful. That should have warned me. Su Qingyao, Ling Shuang, Miao Shushu, and Sha Tong were doing yoga in the living area. I still found the scene ridiculous. 4 beautiful women stretching in coordinated athletic clothes while I drank coffee nearby looked less like real life and more like an advertisement generated by a suspicious algorithm. Lu Ruolan rested nearby, still recovering from her injuries. Qianqian occupied herself with toys and periodically attempted to copy yoga poses with the confidence of someone whose bones had not yet learned fear. I had just started discussing the move again when the gate bell rang. The security display showed Ding Kui Chui. She stood outside with luggage. Her face had healed enough that only a small bandage remained on one side. She wore simple, tidy clothes that emphasized maturity rather than fashion. Her hair was pinned up neatly. She looked exactly like someone prepared to take responsibility for a complicated household. I opened the gate. A few minutes later, she entered the living room, pulling her suitcase. Every conversation stopped. Ding Quique looked at the women. The women looked at Ding Quique. I suddenly understood why generals study battlefield positioning. Before the questions could become an interrogation, I asked Ding Quique whether everything with the old Jiang household had been settled. She nodded. She had returned to see the dying patriarch, canceled the old employment arrangement properly, and made her farewell without allowing Jiang Yang another opportunity to control the situation. She had also returned the property and money the patriarch once intended to leave for her. That part made me frown again. I told you that wasn't necessary. It was necessary for me, she answered. I understood. The old man had saved her life and raised her. She wanted that chapter to end, without anyone later claiming she had stayed for inheritance or left because I offered more money. Clean break, clean conscience, expensive principle. I respected it, even when I thought she was sacrificing too much. Then your compensation here starts properly today, I said. No charity. Salary, benefits, private space, authority over domestic staff, and enough budget to do the job without asking me whether detergent is an approved capital expense. Ding, Quique blinked. Su Qingyao immediately raised a hand. Can I submit handbag purchases through the household budget? No, you didn't even ask the price. That answer becomes more correct as the price increases. Ling Shuang laughed. Ding tried hiding a smile and failed. That helped. She had entered carrying the formal stiffness of someone joining a master's household, while the actual household behaved like a group chat that had accidentally acquired real estate. I wanted her to understand the difference quickly. She was staff, yes, but not property. Not a servant who could be humiliated because somebody had more stars on a bracelet. If Su, Ling, or anyone else treated her the way Jiang Yang had, I would handle it immediately. Su looked offended. Why are you looking at me when you say that? Statistical history. I have excellent manners. 5 people laughed. Even Qianqian. Su stared at the child in betrayal. Ding Kuchui's shoulders finally relaxed. She asked how many employees she would be managing. I told her the number would increase after the move. Then I showed her a limited version of the Emerald Bay layout on my phone. Her eyes widened as she scrolled. Staff residences, guest wings, vehicle garages, kitchen facilities large enough for formal events, security checkpoints, private beach maintenance, marina coordination, gardens that would require actual professionals rather than my personal strategy of water things before they die. Ding looked up slowly. Young Master Chen. This is not a house. I've been saying the same thing. This is an estate operation. Congratulations on your promotion. For the first time since entering, she laughed openly. Then she rolled up an imaginary sleeve and asked for a notebook. That reaction told me hiring her had been the right decision. Some people see a huge responsibility and ask how impressive the title sounds. Ding Qiuqi asked where the work list was. Su Qingyao's eyes moved from Ding's face to her figure, then to the suitcase, then finally to me. That sequence contained an entire interrogation. Ling Shuang remained composed, but one eyebrow lifted. Miao Shushu recognized Ding's age and manner as closer to her own and looked more curious than threatened. Sha Tong, never subtle, leaned towards Su and whispered something that made Su pinch her arm. Lu Ruolan watched me with open amusement. Traitor. Ding Quique bowed slightly. Young Master Chen, I've finished settling matters with the Jiang household. From today onward, I'll serve here as your housekeeper. Silence. Then Su Qingyao repeated the most dangerous word. Housekeeper? I set down my coffee. Yes, we need one, especially after we move. Her eyes narrowed. And she has to be this pretty? There it was. I knew this conversation would be entertaining. I had been correct. Ding Kukui immediately became embarrassed and tried to explain that I had rescued her from a dangerous situation and offered legitimate employment. That only made Su look more suspicious. Rescued her? Xia Tong whispered. That's how half of us got here emotionally. I heard her. So did everyone else. Ling Shuang covered her mouth. Mao Shushu laughed first. The tension cracked. Even Su eventually lost the battle against smiling. I began explaining the household responsibilities Ding would coordinate. Staff, supplies, schedules, security communication, guest preparation, maintenance, and the enormous logistical headache of moving to Emerald Bay. The announcement about Emerald Bay also changed Ding Kuichu's expression. Until that moment, she had probably imagined ordinary housekeeper work in a rich man's villa. Staff schedules, groceries, cleaning standards, guest rooms, vehicle keys, maybe the occasional formal dinner. Estate number 1 was not ordinary. It was closer to managing a private resort that happened to contain my toothbrush. I asked whether the scale frightened her. Ding Kuichui looked surprised by the question, then she shook her head. If young Master Chen trusts me, I'll learn. No bragging. No speech about being the best, just a promise to learn. That was exactly why I had hired her. Su Qingyao immediately announced she would personally supervise the closet arrangements. Ling Shuang asked who had appointed her. Su answered, me. Democracy lasted less than 5 seconds. Miao Shushu asked the practical question of whether Qian could have a room near hers without being too far from the main living area. I said yes. Xia Tong wanted a proper exercise studio. Lu Ruolin wanted a soundproof music room. Yi Wanqing, when I sent her the estate plan, wanted a secure office and separate reception route so business guests would not wander through private family spaces. Every request made sense. The giant property was already becoming less like a prize and more like a map of everyone's needs. That pleased me. I did not want Heavenly Palace to become a monument to my bank balance. A mansion nobody feels comfortable using is just a very expensive waiting room. I wanted Qian leaving toys somewhere inconvenient. I wanted music leaking from a studio, despite the soundproofing because somebody forgot to close the door. I wanted Su arguing about closets, Xia complaining about gym equipment, Ling quietly reorganizing something after Su organized it badly, and Miao pretending not to laugh. I wanted Xiao Ru to come back from the capital and immediately tell me which design decisions were stupid. I even wanted Yi Wanqing bringing work home and then pretending she was not doing exactly that. Maybe that was the strangest change of all. At the beginning, every system reward had looked like proof that I no longer needed anyone. Now the biggest reward I owned only seemed valuable because I could imagine filling it with people. I kept that thought to myself. If Su heard me becoming sentimental, she would weaponize it for years. Some secrets are matters of national security. At the words Emerald Bay, Su stopped smiling. Wait, Emerald Bay? I realized I had accidentally revealed the surprise. She stood up. Which property? I tried to change the subject. Too late. Everyone was watching. I sighed. Estate number 1. For 2 seconds, nobody moved. Then the room erupted. Su Qingyao shouted loud enough to startle Qian. Xia Tong grabbed my arm and demanded to know whether I was serious. Ling Shuang, normally difficult to shock, actually stared with her mouth slightly open. Miao Shushu asked whether I had somehow bought a resort. Lu Ruolin began laughing from her chair. Ding Kuikui looked from them to me, as if reconsidering what kind of household she had just joined. I lifted both hands. Surprise. The reaction was exactly why I had waited. For a few minutes, everyone talked at once. Questions about rooms, beach access, security, vehicles, staff, Qian's space, studios, and whether Su could host parties without notifying the federal government. I answered what I could. The move had not happened yet. We still needed to pack, plan, transfer staff, inspect rooms, and decide how the giant estate would actually function as a home rather than an expensive museum. But standing in the old villa surrounded by luggage, laughter, jealousy, questions, and Ding Kuikui's slightly overwhelmed expression, I felt something unexpected. The system had begun my new life by threatening to kill me if I lost my only girlfriend. Everything after that had looked like a race for wealth and survival. Somewhere along the way, survival had turned into construction. Not only buildings, a family, a network of people who trusted me. A life complicated enough that a full-time housekeeper had become medically necessary. I still had billions, cars, companies, skills, artifacts that violated both science and good naming conventions. I still wanted to climb higher. That ambition had not disappeared. But when Ding Kuikui stood at the door with her suitcase and the others immediately began arguing over where she would stay, the next stage of my life suddenly felt less like conquering the world and more like trying to survive breakfast with everyone in the same house. Somehow, that challenge felt more dangerous and far more interesting.